I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 17th meeting of the Zoning Board of Review. We're here on a matter collectively known as the Seasons Matter, which has been continued from December 6th, 2023, January 10th, February 22nd, March 6th, March 20th, April 29th, and May 29th. And before we get started, I just want to introduce people that are up here for those of you who've never been here before. My name is Lisa Geshite, and I'm the chair. To my right is David Collins. To his right, Jennifer Hilton Kavanaugh and Jay Edwards. Jackson. How am I doing? Sorry about that. To his right is Tara Ferreira, and our stenographer tonight is? Susan LeBlanc. Thank you. And to my left is Mike Marcello, Joe Zalzabak, Edwin Schober, and John Hoyle, who's our building and zoning official. Not here tonight is our second alternate, Marlon Olivia. So we will get going. I think that the record should reflect that we did get an affidavit from Jennifer Hilton Kavanaugh indicating that she was unable to attend on the May 29th, and that she has been aware. She watched the hearing that was on YouTube in its entirety yesterday. So if anyone wants to inspect this will be made a part of the record.
That's part of the just for the record, that was part of the stipulation of the parties that Ms. Hilton Kavanaugh would be able to continue to hear this matter as long as she submitted an affidavit to the effect that she would watch the meeting that she missed, and according to the affidavit, she watched the meeting yesterday. Congratulations, thank you.
Lots of zoning.
So where are we?
Could we just mark this as Town Exhibit 1 for tonight?
You want to
I'm
keep
so
it up
lucky.
here so we make sure we file it in the appropriate place?
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Rob Stolzman. I represent the applicant. At the last hearing, we had concluded with examination and cross-examination of our witnesses. We reserved for rebuttal or redirect or rebuttal, and we do not plan on doing that tonight. We still reserve for possible filing of memoranda and legal documents and perhaps a rebuttal depending on the testimony that's forthcoming.
Hey, good evening, Karen Benson on behalf of Preserve Tiverton.
Yeah, and Christopher in the video on behalf of Tracy Hayward.
So pleased to be here tonight to finally begin the substantive exhibits and evidence on behalf of Preserve Tiverton and Tracy Haywood. I don't know if there are any other administrative matters. Mr. Solicitor, I know you all had a conversation. Is there anything else that needs to be put on the record about like motions and supplemental memos and all of that?
Well, if we're going to defer on any legal issues, we did file a supplemental memorandum, and we pointed out that between the last hearing and now, we've received the Superior Court decision in the appeal of the Planning Board decision. And in that, the court did rule that Preserve Tiverton did not have standing to appeal. In light of your rules and regulations, which have objectors and members of the general public, we reserve the right to object and do object, and reserve the right to brief it and argue that Preserve Tiverton does not have standing to present witnesses and testimony other than as a member of the general public. We mentioned that in our supplemental memorandum, and we continue to, just for the record, proffer that objection.
And we only received that, fewer than 10 days prior to the hearing, so we, Preserve Tiverton, and I believe Ms. Haywood will also reserve for an opportunity to fully brief and perhaps oral argue. So we can get to the substantive matters. I have filed a motion to strike. That was timely filed. We're going to hold that in abeyance pursuant to the agreement of the parties. Maybe a motion hearing for all of these things would be appropriate if it's not getting too fancy. So we reserve on that as well. Tonight, just so that we have an idea of what to expect, we're planning to optimistically present 2 witnesses. The first witness would be a traffic engineer, Gordon Meth. You already have his CV. And the second witness would be...
It's Peter Friedrichs. You have his report, CV, and exhibits referenced in his report.
So I'd like to get my water bottle, and then I'll call Mr. Meth.
Okay.
Just one issue, Madam Chair. So we've got the motion to strike that Ms. Benson filed, and there's the supplemental memorandum. I'm not sure if it's styled as a motion for anything, but it asserts certain claims, averments, and so I don't know when you would want, at least I want to be able to respond to the supplemental memorandum to certain issues, not all of them. And so at some point, if you could direct the parties when you would like those response memorandums or objections, whatever they might be, it'd be helpful. I'm not saying you have to make the decision now, but at some point before the end of these hearings so that we can address it, okay?
Well, we'll raise, I thought everybody just reserved their legal objections or arguments. We'll hear them at the end of the testimony.
Fine.
Okay.
We are going to put up, I spoke to Attorney Solzman about this, the engineering drawing, and I just need a minute to get the computer plugged in and should I pull that down, or? Thank you. And I apologize if I seem a little tentative. I'm wearing glasses and not contacts, so I can't roam around too much because of my vision. And once that's done, I will call Gordon Meth and ask that he be sworn in.
Can you just put on the record so we make sure everyone has it, what you submitted for this witness?
Yes, thank you. Back in December of 2023, I believe, we submitted just a CV of Gordon Meth P.E., civil engineer. There is no report, but I will go through what information was relied on as part of the testimony tonight. And I also would, with the board's permission, I'll put on a little bit of information regarding his CV, just because it may have been a long time since everyone had a chance to look at that CV.
Karen, can I, just to clear, so somewhere in this packet, we've got a traffic study from that's dated December 2013?
That's correct.
Was that submitted by you?
That was submitted by me. That was just submitted in July.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me go to that. Yep, that was submitted 10 days prior to today's
Yeah,
hearing.
I'm not questioning what you submitted in the timeliness. I just need to put on the record what this witness is going to testify. So we have a CV. I believe that the parties have already stipulated that there weren't going to be any objections as to the qualification of experts.
Correct.
That's correct. So that's, we'll take the CV, obviously, that's fine. And then there was no report attached to that CV, which I understand. And then at some point, was there a supplemental report submitted? I just want to make sure we have.
No report.
Okay.
The records that you have now will be the VHB December 2013
Yep.
report, and then 4 ITE traffic charts. Let me find those. So we can put that in the record. Okay. They are as follows.
Hold on, just, make sure I have it. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you want to mark the CV as preserves exhibit. I know that's been an issue for you, Madam Chair.
I mean, if it's been submitted and you stipulate the qualifications, you know,
Okay.
it's just another piece of paper we have to look at.
Sure, sure. So tonight's exhibits were VHB, Vanass, Hagen, Brustlin, December 2013 traffic report. The caption is Proposed Tiverton Crossings. You have it? Then there are 4 ITE trip generation.
Karen, I don't want to interrupt. That report is 26 pages. When I say that report, the proposed.
Correct.
Right.
That's correct.
And so the supplemental to that, not supplemental, but there was an additional items submitted?
Yes. There are 4 ITE trip generation charts. One is captioned 1,000 square foot GFA, weekday AM. The next one is 1,000 square foot GFA, weekday PM. Then there's PM peak adjacent street and AM peak adjacent street. You have that? Because if not, I might have copies in the trunk of my car.
Does the board have that?
Yeah.
Okay?
We have it.
Thank you. All right, I'll call Gordon Meth, please. Could you swear him in, please?
Yes, I do.
Good evening, Mr. Meth.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Members of the board, I'm just briefly going to go through his qualifications. They're not in dispute, but just so you can appreciate without having to go through the 6-page CV. So what is your occupation, Mr. Meth?
I am a civil engineer specializing in highways and traffic and transportation.
And how long have you done this for?
I graduated university in 1991 with a bachelor's degree, in 1992 and a master's degree. I've been employed in the field continuously since then, so 32 years.
Can everyone hear okay?
Here, let me pull this closer.
How's that? All right. Now, can you very briefly summarize, if you would, what you do as a traffic engineer, please?
So, first of all, I have testified before land use boards, planning or zoning boards, or combined land use boards, in probably in excess of 70 municipalities, mostly in New Jersey, which is where my office is, also in Pennsylvania and Rhode Island. I am a licensed professional engineer, have been licensed since 1993, and have been licensed in Rhode Island since 2022. I think I've hit night meeting number 600. For a period of 9 years, I was the board engineer for a planning board, and 7 years a board of adjustment in Parsippany Troy Hills in New Jersey, reviewing all applications. And several municipalities have retained me to review applications on their behalf for traffic impacts of site developments and proposals. I have continuously served in the Institute of Transportation Engineers in elected leadership positions, and recently I was elected to be the International Vice President of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I've probably reviewed about 400 applications for boards and municipalities. I have also testified for applicants on traffic impacts as well as occasionally for interested parties such as tonight.
Do you have any experience in designing and actual engineering of roadways, intersections, and developments?
Yes, I do. For most of my career, I worked in consulting engineering, managing, and one of my most recent positions for almost 10 years, I was running a traffic engineering department. So not only was I performing traffic impact studies and reviewing them, we designed traffic signals, intersections, roadways, and 7 years ago, I made a switch. So now, for the most part, I work on forensic litigation as a highway engineering expert.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for this person as far as his qualifications?
I don't.
I think we should get right into the testimony. Mr. Meth, can you tell the board, please, what did you rely on to prepare for tonight's hearing? What materials did you review? What did you observe? Give us a bit of an outline, please.
Certainly. I was retained to review a proposed application for a 3-use project, gas station convenience store with a drive-through coffee shop at Main and Sousa Road in Tiverton. As part of that, I was provided a site plan application and a traffic impact study produced by Pare engineers. I've also received revised drawings from March meeting and revised traffic impact study and several correspondence from, from Pare Engineering. And I also reviewed the deposition transcript of Mr. Shevlin from Pare. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Par.
Par, sorry.
It's okay.
Sounds better with Brady.
I know.
When you read a transcript, you can't get pronunciations, so my apologies.
And it would be fair to say that when you say deposition transcript, you mean actually the
I'm sorry.
hearing where Mr. Shevlin
Yes.
testified here before the zoning board, correct?
Yes, the hearing transcript from the night he testified.
Okay.
I also have been to the site on several occasions in peak hours to review the conditions and observe for myself firsthand what we were dealing with.
Okay. And we discussed this 2013 traffic study. Was that part of the material that you reviewed to prepare for this evening?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Let's start with the PAR report. That report begins with data collection. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
And let me just go to that report. What was one of the first elements of data collection that they collected?
So all traffic analysis studies, and the whole purpose of a traffic analysis study is to advise land use boards about potential traffic impacts of a project, and if necessary, just to influence their decision. I used to enjoy telling people that I just advise about impacts. I don't take a position on a project. However, I was appointed to the planning board in my own town, and I'm the vice chair now, so I don't get to use that line anymore. But the whole point of it is to advise. Now, the most critical step to figure out what the traffic impacts of a potential project are to understand existing conditions and then apply a future no-build, which is scenario, means there's no project, but you put in all the other background developments that haven't been built yet or are not fully occupied. Sometimes, in normal conditions, that would mean if there was a shopping center or an office building somewhere nearby that was only 50% used, you put in traffic for that for full build-out. Then you superimpose the development site traffic. One of the most important components is the baseline traffic conditions. You have to understand what is normal. In this instance, that was extremely hard to determine because the data collection was conducted during COVID. When it was conducted, I believe the schools were capped at 25% capacity. Many people were working remotely. Conditions were not normal. Now, PAR did account for that. How they accounted for that was they asked the state how much traffic volumes are down generally and came up with an answer of approximately 20%. So they did a count in March of 2021, March 18th exactly, and then expanded it to try to get normal conditions. In this instance, they used a 20% factor. Besides the fact the math is wrong, the key is if you're at 80% and you want to get to 100%, you got to multiply by 1.25, 25%. So there's even a slight variation there instead of a 20% factor. However, in this instance, the bulk of the traffic impacts happen at one location, an intersection of Main Road and Sousa Road. That is a two-way stop-controlled intersection with only one lane per approach. It is probably the most, it's one of the more delicate types of intersections when it comes to traffic operations. When you're at a two-way stop-controlled intersection with only one lane per approach, you have the direction that does not stop. So the order of priority becomes, first of all, everyone's supposed to yield to a pedestrian that's legally there, whether there's a crosswalk marked or not, all right? Everyone is supposed to stop and wait. Then you get your through movements going, and if somebody's looking to turn left, they have to wait from the main road that does not have a stop sign. They have to wait for a gap in traffic, okay, before they can make their move. Then you've got the people from the side streets get to proceed when traffic is clear and there are sufficient gaps for them. Of course, they have to decide, since it's a four-way intersection, who got there first and who gets to go first. However, that's the way the intersection operates. There's no turn lanes here, so there's no bypassing of turn traffic. So a left-turning vehicle on the main road does block all other traffic. That's the way an intersection like this functions. So the most critical movement from what I've seen, based on the counts conducted by PAR and by other studies, is really the westbound approach on Sousa Road. So it's very critical to get that volume right.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I want to make sure we talk about all the studies before you get to the flow, okay?
Understood.
Because isn't it fair to say that PAR did a second study in 2022? Isn't that right?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Now, we have 2021, you testified that they did a study and they tried to scale up based on conversation with DOT, and then that was 2021 during COVID. Then they did a study in 2022. Did these new counts give an accurate picture, at least in your opinion, of the impacts, at least as to the volume of traffic that can be expected from this development?
No, they did not.
Okay.
And I'll explain. What PAR did is they conducted tube counts, ATR counts. Those are tubes that go across the road and count vehicle actuations. And they counted for the entire day. And they counted Sousa Road, both directions of it, on June 22nd, 23rd, 2022. Then they counted Main Road on June 28th and 29th of 2022. And used those to compare to say that the counts that they expanded from 2021 were accurate and reasonable, these were lower. The only issue is, well, it's not the only issue, but the last day of school for Tiverton schools was June 17th, 2022 that year, basically before this study was conducted. And the graduation for the high school was on June 10th. So this was not what I would consider ordinary conditions. This was summer conditions. And the volumes were low relative to other counts in the area. One of the other ways to validate and verify data It's always important to take a look at whatever other previous studies exist. There was a study within the appendix of the PAR report that had existing traffic volumes in it from a study conducted by Beta for Bayside condominiums from 2020 with volume counts for the intersection of Main and Sousa. And it actually showed that the turning movements and volumes on Sousa Road were about 13% higher in the afternoon peak hour in the Beta study versus the PAR study with the 20% extra. It was, and 5% higher in the morning. So there was data available from what was considered normal conditions.
And is that a standard of practice in the industry of traffic engineering to look at historical data?
Yes. You're looking to make sure, whenever you do a study and you collect data, it's the obligation of the person preparing the study to make sure they're reflecting normal conditions. And to do that, one of the more basic techniques is look at previous counts and make sure they're consistent. The problem is sometimes if you find they're inconsistent, you don't know which is right, so you may have to go back and do an extra count. But the key is you look for that history to make sure you're reflecting normal conditions. In this case, PAR had access to a count taken about a year before their count, presumably before COVID, that they could have relied on and used the higher volume presented. Further, public records had a traffic counts and study of this intersection prepared by VHB in 2013, the one that we introduced in evidence. Notable on that is VHB studied for another development with using the same corner, AM peak hour, PM peak hour, and Saturday peak hour. Saturday peak hour is often a critical time period to look at. It's especially for retail operations. It is a very busy period. Noteworthy from the VHB study was that the Saturday counts were almost as high as the evening peak hour and significantly higher than the morning peak hour when they counted it. So the Saturday peak hour they identified as a very critical volume time period. The main, just to give it for instance, when VHB did their counts in 2013, Main Road had 747 vehicles an hour coming by this site north of Sousa. In the PM, they had 1135 vehicles an hour. On a Saturday, they had 1,045 vehicles per hour. So now this study did not include any consideration or analysis of a Saturday.
This study, you mean PAIR?
I'm sorry, the PAIR study did not include any analysis of a Saturday.
All right, let's get some context here for the board's benefit. It was 2013, okay? That's admittedly a long time before what we're looking at now, okay? So I think it bears some analysis for the board's sake to look to see, is it probative and is it helpful for the board's consideration for what's before them tonight, right?
Yes.
So let's look at what is the study area for the traffic report that VHB did back in 2013?
They looked at numerous intersections, and they're all within the report that we just submitted.
Okay, but it's Sousa Road and Schooner Drive and Main Road. It's this exact area, is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And it's also accurate to say that in 2013, much of the development along this area, for example, Sakanape Manor was already in place. Is that fair to say?
I don't know what was in place or what it came online afterwards. I do know that the forecast volumes for 2018 from the VHB study showed failing levels of service at Main Road and Sousa Road and Schooner Drive. And I believe at the time they were even discussing a traffic signal.
Failing level of service. Do you remember what that level of service was? Was it F?
It was, I'm sorry.
there's a question from one of
Sure.
our board members.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to figure out where we're headed for this. Why are we interested in traffic counts? Does that lead to accident rates? Why do we care about traffic rates?
So the key issue is this, all right? What was presented and testified to had to do with level of service. And that's a measure of the delay at an intersection, and for comparison purposes. All right, there was substantial testimony about that. To get to level of service, you have to start with baseline counts, and then you superimpose no-build counts, then you superimpose site traffic, and you analyze it.
The end goal here is what? Is it to determine, is it to predict the accident rate? Like, what does that all mean? Why do we care about all this? I'm totally lost here.
Okay, so the purpose of a traffic impact study, which was prepared by PAR as part of this, a typical traffic study, the only item it really did to address safety was assess site triangles, site visibility, okay? It didn't really look at crashes. The purpose of it is to inform the board of the impacts of a project. So how much will conditions change? And that means you compare level of
Yeah, but
service.
Mr.
How do we determine what that means? You know, is it, do
If-
you understand my question?
Maybe I can answer the question instead of the traffic engineer. The Tiverton ordinance, Section 4, requires that you consider certain elements. And those requirements are why the applicants put their traffic expert on and did the traffic study. So we have a requirement that there'll be no nuisance in the neighborhood, that it won't hinder or endanger vehicular or pedestrian movement. And one way to reach those conclusions, which is why we brought this engineer in, is to look at hard data. It's just
And
not.
how do we determine what's good and what's bad?
Well, that's for us to determine. That's for you to determine, based
I mean,
upon.
there are no requirements.
So this board, once they hear the testimony, you're gonna have to weigh the evidence, who you believe is more credible, or, you know, who prepared a better report, or the reports, that's for you to determine once we hear all the evidence. That's for you to,
Well,
that's
let
for
me
you to
ask
weigh.
this. They have collected a lot of data, which you've looked at.
Yes.
And have you taken that data and compared it to actual results in terms of accident rates in that intersection? I mean, that would be the obvious way to determine whether that data is valid or not. Because we do have history on it. We do have police reports on accident rates in that intersection. Right? So,
The analysis prepared by PAR was strictly level of service, operational service, not accident rates. Crash rates are a very complicated issue, particularly in intersections where you have several movements that come into conflict. There's not necessarily a direct link to delay and crash rate. They are separate and distinct issues. I now deal, since I became a forensic expert 7 years ago, very explicitly with crashes and history. But I will also say there is not necessarily a relationship between operational impacts and crash rates. It is not, I don't believe it is, there may be techniques to try to forecast future crashes, but they're not very refined. They are not robust.
I have a question to follow up
Go
on.
ahead.
So just to help you, Dave, a little bit. I think every business being built up, yes, I know, I understand, it's funny. Every business being built up, it's almost a requirement, every gas station, including them, even if they were not here, to a traffic study, to see how people could get in and out of their building, to how the engineer drawing. The accident, David, is not what dictate the traffic in front of my station when I built it, or why do we do traffic study? We don't count the accident. We're tracking the flow, how many people going in and out, where the buses are, where people walk. not how many accidents happen on any intersection. I built a gas station just up street from there, and I paid for a traffic study, not to see how many accidents happen on Main Road, to see how I could line up the car at the car wash, how to get people in and out, where's the traffic flow. It's not just about accident. There's a lot goes into even just building it. Even if they were not in front of us, they would still have to do that traffic study.
And how do they determine whether the results are acceptable or not?
That's how we decide if it works or not. That's how they say when I asked before in these meetings to one of the gentlemen, we're not gonna discuss, one of the gentlemen, why didn't you do it at a certain time? Because I was not satisfied with that. That's up to us to discuss, but it's not about accident. As any general business will know that we have to do a traffic study to figure out if it works, if it flows, how to get in and out of the building. That's why they put an exit on Sousa Road. That's how it got designed. Engineers do a traffic study on purpose, even if they're not sitting here. And I'll dare them to say no.
Well, we don't have any actual requirement to do a traffic study,
That's what.
right? Is that true?
That is true. But it is an element that the courts have indicated that traffic is a consideration for a special use permit and how it may affect the neighborhood and whatnot, as Ms. Benson has indicated.
That's what our ordinance also
Correct.
says. Our town ordinance also, as you well know, requires it, has a specific requirement for
Our-
special use.
When you say our,
The town of Tiverton ordinance has that as an element of what you as a board need to consider.
I have,
it only says we have to have safety. We look at safety, right? That's part of, what is it, B?
I do have a question that might help you a little. Doesn't Rhode Island DOT have like a level of A, B, C, G, E, F? And
Yes.
I'm sure you're gonna go into
Yeah, but
it.
it's a recommendation.
It says if it's the best traffic, you know, moving slowly, whatever, or going
Yes,
poorly.
thank you. Let's
Yeah.
try to do
Yeah,
that.
but isn't that for designing a road? Not for evaluating traffic, well, okay.
Let's them get their evidence in and then we'll.
Okay, all right, I have more questions, but I'll let you proceed.
Okay.
And we probably will talk more later. Thank you.
Thank you.
But
So,
yes, I
I'm
think
sorry.
maybe the level of service would be, when you're done, Mr. Meth, I would like to have some testimony about that, if we could, please.
Yes. So, just to conclude the traffic data comparisons, Sousa Road, which is the most critical movement at this intersection based on the studies I have seen and reviewed. In the VHB study, the existing count was 220 vehicles in the evening peak hour. In the beta study from 2020, it was 188 vehicles.
Go back, can you give me that again?
Sorry?
Can you go back and just give me that number again?
Certainly. The VHB study from 2013, there were 220 vehicles in the evening peak hour on Sousa Road in both directions. The beta study from 2020, there were 188 vehicles on Sousa Road, both directions. In the PAR study, with the 20% increase factor with their 2021 count, they counted 166 vehicles on Sousa Road in the evening peak hour. In the June 22nd and 23rd count they did in 2022, they counted 126 vehicles on Sousa Road. So 2/3 of what they counted and forecast are very, showing it was a very low volume. In the morning peak hour, there were, in 2013, there were 107 vehicles in both directions on Sousa Road. In 2020, in the beta study, there were 155 vehicles. In the PAR study, with the 20% factor, they got to 148 vehicles. Still less than the volume they had in the appendix of their own report with the beta count. And then, when they conducted their study on June 22nd and 23rd, on the morning peak hour, they counted 78 vehicles in the morning peak hour. Half of what they counted with their expansion factor in 2021.
Could you go up the revised, what was the revised count?
Well, it was a verification count. It was with ATR counts. And as I said, it was conducted while school was not in session. They counted 78 vehicles in the morning peak hour, two directions, versus the 148 with their 2021 expanded by 20%. So right off the get-go, there were questions in my mind about the validity of that June data, June 2022 data, to use it as a reference sample.
Now, did the June data, or did any data collected by PAIR consider traffic impacts on Saturdays?
No.
So is there information available concerning Saturday traffic?
On Sousa Road in 2013, the VHB study, they counted 150 vehicles in the Saturday peak hour.
So let's get away from the numbers for a minute. Is that the highest traffic count of any days, of any data?
The PM peak hour was higher, but the Saturday number was higher than the morning peak hour.
Okay. And that wasn't considered by Mr. Shevlin or in either the beta or the new studies done in 2021 and 2022 by PAIR?
Correct.
Okay. Now, we had a question, a very good question about what does all this data mean as far as level of service? And why is that important? That's a DOT standard, correct? Level of service, LOS is the abbreviation.
It goes deeper than the Rhode Island Department of Transportation, but the Rhode Island Department of Transportation does analyze and look at level of service. There's a document called the Highway Capacity Manual. And there's highway capacity software that is used to analyze transportation facilities for quality of service and delay. So there are techniques for traffic signals. There are techniques for studying stop-controlled intersections, all-way stops and two-way stops. There are techniques evolving for analyzing roundabouts. There are techniques for analyzing freeway ramps. There are various different techniques, but they all come back to a quality factor called level of service. Now, they run from A to F. The level of service A is supposed to be the best service. Typically you find that at night. It's not, or like in major off-peak periods. The level service B is a little better. Usually, level service C is usually what's the target for design, often. It is considered good level service. Then there's level service D. We kind of generally refer that as acceptable. And then there's level service E, which can be classified as marginal. And anything past level service E is failure.
All right, I have a couple questions to define what we're talking about, because we have a lot of interest in what does it mean? What does it mean to this project on Main Road and Sousa Road? If I were to tell you level of service D is approaching unstable traffic flow, is that an accurate description?
Yes.
And I believe Mr. Shevlin agreed with that and testified to that in his direct testimony, right?
That's my recollection based on the review of the transcript.
And do you recall what the level of service on Saturday midday was based on that 2013 report? If I were to suggest to you that it was level of service F, would that refresh your memory?
I believe the forecast delay was level service F.
Forecast.
And at the time, I believe the level of service was more in the C to D range.
Okay.
But with the development traffic that VHB was studying at the time, they were forecasting level service F.
And I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Yeah. Was the level of service that they studied F already, or was it higher?
No, at the time, the delay they forecast for Main and Sousa, for the westbound movement, actually, they seem to have rotated the various movements they looked at, but they were looking at a worse level of service in the evening peak hour of level service E at the time, in 2013. The Saturday midday was C, was the worst movement, with a delay of about 20 seconds. And the level service E I talked about before was about 43 seconds of delay. And the morning was B, which was 14 seconds of delay. The way the criteria works, at a stop-controlled intersection, any amount of delay of more than 50 seconds is considered level service F and failing. For a traffic signal, there's a higher number because people know the light's going to turn green. So 80 seconds is F at a signal, but at a stop-controlled intersection, it's E. That's about where, it's 50. That's where people start presumably taking unnecessary chances because they just don't know if they'll ever get a break. Level service D ends at, I believe, 35 seconds. So anything from 35 seconds to 50 is level service E. And the descriptions, if you look in the book, tell you that you may get small periods of excess delay there and traffic flow is unstable. And I believe Mr. Shevlin testified that after this project is built, they will be just barely into level service E for Sousa Road. Based on my review of material, and I will tell you how I got there, I've found that intersection approach will be pushing the top ends of level service E with this project.
The top is the worst or the best?
The worst.
What's the second? Did you do any of your own traffic counts?
I did not do any of my own traffic counts. I sat and observed traffic and existing conditions of level service B in the morning. I would agree that there was minimal delay in the morning in the current situation.
I have a question.
When did you come out?
I came out in December when there was hearings. I went in the morning and in the afternoon, and I did go through there today and really reconfirm conditions, although it is summer. So it's not really going to be indicative of typical conditions when school's in session.
I'm sorry.
Not because for some reason, I don't remember, maybe it doesn't exist. Any of these traffic study, in your professional opinion, ever take into account a future development, something coming up in these areas, anything like a big apartment development, anything? So we counted the amount of cars coming down Sousa Road right now in 180 cars. But I'm just gonna use that. We have 200 apartments coming up top Sousa Road. Does that ever, in the traffic count, do they ever say potential 20% increase, or this is something we have to think about ourselves? Is there such a thing? Is there such an element?
Yes, there is. That's the difference between existing conditions and what's known as no-build, or baseline conditions. You're supposed to take all known projects that have not come online yet and superimpose their traffic. So that is key part of the process. It was performed in this case. It was looked at, so the extra traffic was superimposed, so you have a proper baseline to compare. And that way you also address cumulative impacts when you have several different projects adding a little piece at a time.
And you're referencing the VHB study?
Well, even the PAR study counted no-build conditions.
Okay.
You add some background development growth from other developments through a factor that's usually published and by various agencies. Then you superimpose specific projects in the area that you know about. So the PAR study did that. The VHB study, to my knowledge, did that because the volume they had existing conditions, existing volumes, and then they had a future build volume for that, I think, Bayshore or Bayside condominiums. Then there was, the VHB study included no-build traffic for projects too. So that's a standard of care practice that traffic engineers use when doing their analysis.
I believe Mr. Collins has a question for you.
You spoke about the state keeping data on all these roads and being concerned about factors such as delay and level of service. Typically, a road is going to grow. There will be a lot of properties along the road that are developed and legally and without the requirement for what we're doing here. And presumably these factors, these letters, the rating of the safety of the intersection is going to get worse over time. And I assume the state looks at that.
So in this case, the state issued a permit for this project. And they've made certain recommendations with regard to the access points or requirements, had it modified and changed. That is not a measure of safety, it's a measure of delay in operations.
Okay, but the state is aware of the fact that perhaps that there is a possibility that the level of delay and the the level of service will decline at this intersection. But they have issued a permit saying it's okay, is that correct? In their opinion, on their road, by the way.
They issued a permit for this project after insisting that the driveways had to be directional instead of being two-way, based on what they said, safety concerns they had at gas stations that don't have proper access management.
I don't want to interrupt, but I think it's a good time to introduce a certain exhibit. With the assistance of Counsel for Colbia, we did get access to the PAP application. And I have just 2 letters tonight. I'm sorry they weren't submitted in advance. May I approach? Yeah, this is 2 letters.
So let's mark this as,
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So this goes
Why don't you give us an opportunity to look at them?
I can describe them for the record.
I just want to mark them, while they're reading them, let's just
Do you
figure
have
out
one
how
more?
we're going to mark this.
Yes.
Please. Thanks, Jim. Well, let's do this. Let's go back. The traffic study that we talked about, which has been submitted in this case, which I believe you submitted it on July 2nd, 2024. Proposed Tiverton's crossing, I have the cover memo, right? That's a transmittal memo from you dated July 2nd, 2024.
Yes.
So let's call that entire memo, which includes,
That's the VBH 2013 study.
which includes the stuff, the 4 things that we talked about.
Sh-
So then
includes-
it's all one document, correct?
Yes, that's what the clerk wanted.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
So let's call that, Preserve Tiverton. Have you entered any other exhibits in this case thus far? Not really.
I requested that the CV be marked, but wasn't deemed necessary, so this might be
Well,
A.
CV will- that's easy to identify, so I'm not worried about that, so.
You were using numbers, Rob?
Well, let's use Preserve Tiverton 1 for now, okay? And then the document you just submitted is 2 separate packets, right?
Nope, it's one packet. It's 2 letters from the Rhode Island Department of Transportation.
Yep.
It comes from the PAP application that the applicants referenced in their direct testimony. And we just pulled 2 letters that were matter of public record. The entire application is not a matter of public record. So these are 2 letters, one dated June 6th, 2023, and one dated June 24th, 2022.
So we're gonna call that packet, those 2 letters, unless you wanna separate them as Preserve Tiverton 2.
Fine.
Are these both dated June 6th?
No.
June 24, 22.
Well, there's like 4 letters in here, not 2. It
It should be 2 letters. One June 6th, 2 pages, and one June 24th, 2 page, 3
The
pa,
entire document is 5 pages.
correct.
Okay. Excuse me, Preserve Tiverton 2. It's 5 pages. Thank you, Karen.
So I have, still got a question.
Okay. Do you want to wait till we?
So you
Yeah.
review it, yeah.
Do you need a copy of that?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Hilton, you're not objecting to the, either exhibit at this point?
These are matters of public record. We do reserve the right to offer rebuttal testimony and including written submissions, as we're not aware of I'm not yet aware of the completeness of these. So rather than delay this hearing, I'll just let you guys know if there's incomplete data on this.
Thank you.
I need a haircut.
Okay, I do have a question. I think it's a quick question. You're aware of this report, I assume?
Yes, I am.
They have reached certain conclusions. Were their conclusions based on the data that you're talking about that was collected by Covia? Or is this just their own review of what's happening?
I do not know what was submitted to the state for their review. I only know what the state responded after reviewing information. And the first concern that I had just mentioned was that they wanted justification for having 2 full-way access points on the state highway before they would proceed, because they specifically said that this is their words, the state's, we tend to have many crashes in the state that occur at gas station locations, and a lot of those crashes have to do with improper access management. Access management, now I'm not reading from the state, access management is a description for controlling access points to improve safety. It's about reducing conflict points and overlapping movements.
Right, so the state has said that what's happening here is okay, based on, we don't know what. It may or may not have been based on the data that you're questioning.
Correct.
Okay.
In my experience, the state has an obligation to provide property owners on state highways access. And that is the application that was filed with the state.
Now, can they stop somebody from building on the state road because they think that they're going to an F, that the state is going to an F if the project is completed?
I'm not fully aware of Rhode Island DOT's powers with respect to that. However, it is generally, if a project is denied, it is usually not based on level of service delay as much as it is based on the safety and operations of the state highway.
And how would they determine that?
It's technical process. They'll review the entirety of the application and the impacts, bearing in mind the rights of individuals to develop their property.
Well, that's something we're concerned about here.
It looks like, on June 24th, that document, it looks like it's probably the PAR engineering traffic study. It says number 5, the traffic impact report should be stamped by the Rhode Island registered professional engineer. Oh, maybe that's their engineer. I don't know.
So the answer is, we don't really
We
know.
don't. Yeah.
No, we don't know. The letter does refer to the traffic impact study report needing to be sealed or signed and sealed by a professional engineer. But we don't know what study was submitted. There's nothing in this that lists what the submissions were.
Well, if the state believes that at this time, proceeding with this project is okay, and then they find in the future, after the project is complete, that the traffic conditions do delay into NF level, what happens? Do they have to fix the road?
Mike, can I suggest that maybe that's a question for PAR instead of our witness?
Well, if he knows.
I'm not familiar with what Rhode Island DOT, what their powers are and what they would do.
Nor did we have access to the entire file. The entire file is not a matter of public record, just so we're clear with what we were able to access.
However, I will add that the state's interest tends to be the state highway, which is in this case Main Road. Main Road does not have stop signs. The delay will be on local streets, Sousa Road, specifically Sousa Road and Shooter Drive, which they are not under the state's jurisdiction.
Susan might be.
Let's have the witness, let's have them present their case and we can ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
Let's have her finish their testimony, we can come back later. I know you have questions.
Can't, all right.
Well, let them, this is their case, let them put on their case and then we can ask questions.
To follow up on the DOT comment about the access, it's fair to say that the applicant made modifications to the entrances and exits for their modified plans, correct?
Correct.
Now, they made provisions for one-way in and one-way out traffic flow, is that right?
On Main Road access points, yes, they did.
Okay. Do you have any experience in how traffic flow accessing the site is enforced?
Based on my experience, the police will not typically enforce the one-way operation on a private property.
Will signage be enough to ensure that drivers comply with the one-way designation?
I believe Mr. Shevlin testified to this at length on questioning during, when he was testifying. And at the time, he acknowledged that there may be people that go the wrong way down one-way driveways. And I believe he also testified that to his knowledge, there won't be anyone on the property who will stop people from going the wrong direction.
So it's fair to say this isn't like, for example, a university campus where they might have security or other individuals who are designated to control traffic. It's not that situation here, is it?
No, it is not.
You said the Tiverton Town Police won't enforce traffic flow on private property.
It's usually not the priority of the police to worry about if somebody went in the wrong way of a driveway.
Okay. And let's, for a moment, look at the Sousa Road entrance, if we could. That entrance now purports to restrict access to vehicles and exclude trucks. Did you see that on the drawing?
I do, and it's on the exhibit behind the board.
Did you review that modified plan?
I did.
And what do you think will happen when a truck attempts to enter on Sousa Road?
I believe that and the island, unless it is substantially higher or bigger than a typical island, trucks will be capable of running over them.
And what's the width of that entrance, do you know?
Let me zoom in a bit. The two sides have lane widths of 10 feet, and the overall width is 24 feet. So there's a 4-foot island in the middle.
Okay.
And it's 4-inch raised median, which is lower than your typical curbs that you see on public streets. They do range from 4 to 8 inches, with 6 inches being the typical.
Okay.
Then maybe.
I can just have a minute. Okay. While we're on access and control on the site, can we talk for a moment, please, about deliveries? Again, the plans were revised to purportedly to accommodate delivery trucks. Did you see anything in the PAIR report or on this drawing provides satisfactory control for delivery?
Well, in terms of delivery, the Institute of Transportation Engineers actually predicts there will be 19 truck trips a day in and out of here. That's probably about 10 trucks, because each of them would come in and go out. That's the trip generation predicted. You're gonna have fuel deliveries, obviously, and that's what's depicted on the plan behind you. There's a blue tractor trailer outline with the wheels shown. And you also have you're gonna have deliveries for the convenience store very frequently. You're gonna have baked goods, sodas, sundries, newspapers, all kinds of items are gonna be delivered to this site. So there's going to be the typical for a convenience store of this size would be 19, or gas station convenience store of this size is 19 trucks per day. Some of them are box trucks, some of them are tractor trailers. So between the iterations of the plan, there used to be a loading space that blocked off several parking spaces in the rear. This latest plan amended that, and now the loading space is loading zone is directly in front of the trash enclosure. But there is the reality is trucks will be accommodated for the convenience store, at least in the rear in this loading space. The downside will be that the turning radius, if a truck tries to turn from Sousa, tractor trailer, or sort of box truck or whatever, is that if there's a queue of vehicles for the drive-through, based on the plan submitted by the applicant, then the swept path of the vehicle is going to encroach on the vehicles at the back end of the queue for the drive-through. But that's the extent of what's been done for tractor trailers on this site. It is technically feasible, though, for tractor trailers, not just tractor trailers, but for delivery vehicles to access this site.
Will the delivery vehicle configuration have any impact on customer parking, in your opinion?
With this revised plan, no. The previous plan, yes.
Okay. Let's stay on parking for a minute, if we could. Did you look at any ITE manual projections for what the parking requirements would be for this facility with the special use permit requests?
Yes. When it comes to parking, there's a publication, the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual, based on data samples. Tells you how many vehicles you can expect to park in a certain area. There are two different numbers. There's the average, which is an average of a number of sites based on the square footage, how many parking spaces were used. Then there's what's known as the 85th percentile. Okay, the 85th percentile is the number at which 85% of sites were found at or below. The reason why we use both is that if you design sites based on the average, half the sites would not have enough parking. All right, it's that simple. When I say average, that means mean, like right down the middle, not some other statistical average. So the 85th percentile is often what is used for designing parking spaces. I recognize that this site has 26 parking spaces, and that exceeds what your ordinance requires. What I will tell you is that during the morning peak hour, you could expect 22 parked vehicles on average and 28 in the 85th percentile, so a differential of 6.
Where are you getting that information?
This is from the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual.
Okay.
For sites of this size. For noon time period or midday peak, whatever the peak that is not the street peak, the average number of parking spaces demanded would be 30, and the 85th percentile, 38 parking spaces. 12 more than are provided on the site. Now, that's what the data shows the demand is for convenience store gas stations. And then 5 p.m., the average would be the sort of street peak for the evening peak hour. The average parked cars would be 16, and the 85th percentile would be 21. So this site based on data, is likely to have parking problems, at least at some times of the day, which a lot of sites like this, gas station convenience stores, in my experience, the applications I've seen have a lot of extra maneuvering room, particularly around the pumps, in case you get queues and everybody else. I recognize most of my practice has been in New Jersey, where we're not allowed to pump our own gas. It is sad, but, and leads to a lot of us waiting.
Somewhat.
Okay. Well, it's only, I feel bad for the people that have to do it, candidly, particularly on days like today. But this site, from just looking at the layout, it seems like almost every square foot of impervious area is being used for a purpose. So if people wanted to create extra parking spaces, they wouldn't be able to without interfering with the flow of the site. If they wanted to park along the curbs or other activities when a site is underparked and people still want to go in.
Okay. So not everyone is going to drive to the site. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
And in fact, the facility has added, at DOT request, a crosswalk to access. Is that right?
That is correct.
Did you review the revised site plan as far as the location of a crosswalk?
I did. The plan, and I'm showing it with a cursor right now. Let me zoom in on it. The plan depicts a sidewalk and crosswalk combination that will cross Main Road on the north leg of the intersection by Sousa Road. It's a marked crosswalk, and it leads into it. It happens to be situated about midway between the intersection of Main Road and Sousa Road and the inbound driveway. So at a typical time period, you're going to have left-turning vehicles in this area, turning in, or actually up here, turning into the site. Right-turning vehicles turning into the site, and left-turning vehicles sitting in this area waiting for traffic to clear to turn onto Sousa Road. I will say that left turn movement and this overlapping right turn movement appear to be, from the data, the heavy movement at this intersection. There is a very heavy left turn movement, turning left from Main Road onto Sousa, and then a corresponding right turn movement, turning right from Sousa Road onto Main Road, northbound. All right, so this crosswalk is situated right in the middle of turning movements for two different positions. And this driveway, there's only about 40 feet of separation from the edge of the driveway to the intersection. That's 2 car lengths at best. It's actually probably a little less than 2 car lengths, because 2 cars stopped in traffic are usually going to leave some shy distance, and usually we use 25 feet per vehicle.
So that the record
spacing.
is clear, I just want to, when you say this driveway, so that the stenographer can make a complete record, do you mean the inbound driveway, the entrance driveway as proposed?
Yes, the Main Road entrance driveway.
Okay. So what is the impact on pedestrians crossing, given this location of the crosswalk?
In terms of preventing conflicts, this is not the best position for a crosswalk. There's an overlapping heavy movement, turning movement, in addition to traffic stopped and queuing in between. A far safer location to avoid conflicts would actually be the south side of the intersection.
And what about impacts on, or do you have an opinion on what would the impacts be on the traffic, given the location of the crosswalk?
Well, the crosswalk, first of all, the Institute of Transportation Engineers does actually predict separately walk and bike and transit trips to gas station convenience stores, or walk only. And in the evening peak hour, they actually predict 27 pedestrian trips in and out of a site, 38 bicycles and pedestrians and transit users. So we're talking about a crosswalk that actually has the potential to be used at times when traffic is peaking. And from the rules of the road, you will have a situation where all traffic will have to stop and wait for those pedestrians to cross before anyone else can move, which, that, obviously, more than half of the cases I deal with as a forensic expert are pedestrians hit by vehicles. It's best characterized as not a fair fight. Okay, so the key is protecting pedestrians is always a high priority, and making the system safe for them. Because when a vehicle hits a pedestrian, the laws of physics ensure that the pedestrian is going to take a lot of damage, depending on the speed of the vehicle, and the size of the vehicle. So this has the potential to have implications for operations, and more importantly, with all the turning movements of vehicles around, at any given time, the sight line to pedestrians coming up the road may be obstructed by a left-turning vehicle. So a vehicle proceeding north on Sousa Road may not see a pedestrian in advance because there's a left-turning vehicle waiting to make a move onto Sousa Road.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. LeBlanc, you need a break? Okay,
Can I ask you a question?
go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'm probably going to ask for just a few minutes prior to cross-examination to review my notes since we didn't get the written report. Do we have a lot of questions left, or one break might suffice? I just offer that.
I don't have too many questions left. I also want to go through my notes because there was a lot of activity from the board.
I just thought.
But we should,
It's been an hour and a half.
it has been?
It's an hour and a half. She deserves a break.
Yes, yes.
Why don't we hold it? Do you write it down so you don't
You know,
forget?
yeah,
Okay.
Lisi.
We'll take a 10-minute recess.
That's my cadence.
Collins has been anxiously waiting to ask his question. Okay, we're back in session.
I have a question about your crosswalk. It sounds like you're saying that there is a better place to put the crosswalk.
Well, look, I haven't explored the options. All I've done, I'm sorry, Mike. I have not explored all the options for potential locations. What I'm saying is that this is, in my opinion, based on the turning movements that are going to be occurring in the proposed driveway and at the current intersection, this is not an ideal place for a crosswalk.
Okay, so my next question is, do you have any reason to believe that a crosswalk couldn't be installed that meets the requirements?
So that's an interesting question. So if I understand it, you're asking me, could there be a crosswalk that meets requirements? But there's no requirement other than this is a bad place for it.
Well, could there be one that you would feel, a position that you would feel would be a good place for it? I'm not asking you to design a crosswalk, but I'm just saying, I'm asking if you feel there's no way of having a crosswalk here in this, for this site.
So here's the situation. People are likely to cross anyway. There is like an attractor for pedestrians on one side of the road and people that live on the other side of the road. Pedestrians will invariably, independent of guidance or direction, take the path, the shortest path between 2 points. The other thing is there's a legal crosswalk here, regardless, whether it's marked or not marked. Every intersection has one. The problem is, when you actually mark a crosswalk, you are telling the public that this is a safe and appropriate place to cross. That's my concern. So even though it would be more circuitous, avoiding all of the turning movements that are going to be happening in a very small, isolated little area putting a crosswalk on other approaches would probably be preferable. However, I have not explored that. I have not looked at the technical feasibility of installing crosswalks in other areas, or whether it's an appropriate or safe place for that. There may be other issues with that, such as a grade change or something else, or lack of right-of-way. So let's put it this way, there's a lot of consideration and detail that goes into designing a crosswalk. What I have strictly pointed out is that given all the turning movements that are going to occur in a very small proximity to this crosswalk, which may even at times be blocking the crosswalk, or having vehicles turning left, obstructing sight lines for people at this crosswalk, there are concerns with this crosswalk. And it may require enhancements such as flashing lights or some other treatment. So that's what I've pointed out. I hope that addresses the question.
All right, so it sounds like this crosswalk could be made to work. It's just that it's not there yet, in your opinion.
I think there's a valid safety concern with the crosswalk as proposed. I don't know if it can be feasibly addressed or not. I haven't explored the options.
I have a question that has nothing to do with the crosswalk. So I always, for the last few hearings here, I always said it's nice to look at these traffic studies and the way it's designed when it's sunny and 70 degrees and everybody in a good mood. And I always struggle as a gas station owner of 6 of them at one time. The fact is, the problem we have with these stations, it's when the snow come in, when a hurricane's gonna land, when we have a holiday the night before a holiday, before 4th of July, everybody wants everything. And I find, we all do these traffic study, with all due respect to all of you, do you ever take into consideration, like, do anybody take a traffic study, well, what happened when we had a hurricane? When we park and you say 26 cars, 5 cars, and trucks pulling in and turning, that doesn't work at all in such a place as when it's a hurricane, a holiday, snowstorm. Did you guys ever, as a traffic, I had asked that before, ever take that into consideration, or we just do it when it's 70 degrees and there's a bus maybe coming down the street?
That's a very interesting question. The key is, we always look for normal conditions, recognizing there are always extremes. And so we look for something that is representative of normal. Bear in mind that when you're doing a study, you and this board has to weigh off the rights of a property owner to develop their property versus, so if you basically, you have to weigh that off against the potential impacts. That's the role of why boards such as yours get traffic testimony. All right, you gotta weigh that off. And you gotta sometimes understand the ranges, because, okay, that's the difference, as I testified about parking, between average and 85th percentile. You've gotta understand the range. It's not, because when we do an analysis, we do tend to give very precise answers, but there's actually, shall we say, some variation in that answer. The kind that would drive statisticians crazy about, how we give more precision sometimes than the data we give into it.
And that's on a personal, I'm a professional, not a person, I don't know, but do you ever work on a site and get billed and everything, and you drive by it after it's done and you say, oh my God, what did we do?
I am under oath, right?
What did you say?
I am under oath.
Yes, yes, 100%.
I may have, I can't recall.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, may we proceed with the evidence?
I did have my last traffic question, which I didn't get to ask before.
Go ahead.
We have concerns, or you have concerns about level of service and delay. My question is it, are these concerns the result of a COBIA design, or would this be the same situation for any gas station or a gas station and restaurant operation?
My concerns are independent of the land use. Bear in mind, there are 3 separate and distinct land uses in this case that are combined, and it is very common for gas stations and convenience stores to be combined. But it is not necessarily common to add a drive-through element to that. So you've got 3 different components. My concerns are about the information specific to this application, and other uses may have their own issues or not. So I don't know if that answers your question fully. But what I'm saying is, all I'm testifying to is the information presented about this specific application.
Well, it sounded like most of your concerns about level of service and delay were driven by the characteristics of the highway, not the facility that COBIA wants to install alongside the highway.
So all of the concerns I've expressed so far have to do with the data analysis. That is correct. And there is one other element I have not gotten to yet, and that is the fact that since you do not have left turn lanes here, that with the entrance driveway that I've got up on the screen right now, the left turns into that driveway will take up space from from operations at Main Road and Sousa Road and Schooner Drive. The key is the analysis techniques assume a stop-controlled intersection in isolation by itself, okay? Just not that there will be a bunch of vehicles that had to queue up behind left-turning vehicles going into a gas station and then proceed. That creates unexpected gaps or conflicts with traffic. The appropriate way to have analyzed this, which was not done by PAR, was to take the left turns into the driveway and add them in the intersection as left turns onto Sousa Road, because effectively, in operations, that's the way they'll be because of the proximity of these two the intersection to the driveway. All right, so that is one way that the analysis techniques would have been better reflective of what's really gonna happen after this is developed. but I didn't quite get there because I haven't talked about site traffic yet.
Let's get the applicant, let him finish his testimony, we can ask these questions, because I know,
Thank you, Counsel.
can we just do that? Did that answer your question? We'll have opportunity to ask questions.
He answered the question.
Yeah, let her finish, and then we'll have a little round robin after that. So let's, go ahead, because I have some questions too, I want to just clarify, but go ahead.
So there's some additional data provided by Pear, and it goes to these 3 special use permit uses. They've given us some data from 2023 from other drive-throughs. Did you review that data?
I did.
Do you think that data has any probative value, that the board should consider it?
So queuing data is all well and good, but you need to understand the trip generation too. So related to the trip generation.
And did we have any trip generation or traffic counts
Not
for
that I
this
s-
new data?
Not that I saw
All right.
presented. I will also say that I've seen numerous studies about queuing, and I've seen much higher numbers in analysis for coffee shops. But once again, what I'm saying is that data is, we're specific to a time and a place and a certain trip generation. And without that tie-in to trip generation, it's hard to make a direct connection to compare it, to say that it would apply to this site.
So let's stay with trip generation, if we could, please, and talk about the analysis that Pear did and how valid or accurate you feel it was.
Okay, so when it comes to predicting trip generation, this is a very important part of the process for traffic engineering. There's actually a trip generation handbook that accompanies the trip, that gives guidance on how to actually use the trip generation rates. Basically, the Institute of Transportation Engineers publishes the trip generation manual. They're up to the 11th edition. And all it really is a data sample. So it takes a bunch of sites, looks at traffic in and out, and by time of day and by land use variables. So they take the variables and give you a prediction of what could happen. It's important, there's direction within the manual that professional judgment is needed when you're selecting and using the manual about how it'll apply to a specific site. All right, I will tell you that the gas station convenience store model of use has been evolving. It is still evolving. And there's actually a missing link on some data that we could probably use about now that electric vehicle parking stations have been introduced at a lot of sites. Because it's changed the dynamic, that people are parked there for longer periods of time. But what I will tell you is that the data sample, in this case, sites are categorized into different categories. It just so happens this site is proposed to have 8 fueling positions. If you go to 9, it goes into a different category. It also has 3,200 square feet of convenience store and 400 square feet of coffee shop. I think they took a 3,600 square foot building and made some approximations about the coffee shop component. At 4,000 square feet, trips change. Okay, these are just the organization of the data. I was heavily involved in providing data for super convenience store gas stations, a new category, much bigger, where you have 16 pump fueling positions and 5,500 square foot convenience stores. In this one instance, there's trip generation for a category that's been around for a long time, called convenience store. Convenience stores, as we know, are, they're a very common element of our society. In this case, the ITE trip generation predicted in the morning peak hour 146 trips, and that's what was used.
Whose data is this now, just to be clear for the board?
Sorry, this is from the PAR study.
Okay, but
Right.
we provided some alternative data, is that correct?
We haven't provided it, I'm about to testify to it.
And we actually did provide those 4 exhibits,
We provided the exhibits,
Yeah.
which are the data sheets.
how to analyze them, though.
That's for the coffee shop, though. For the gas station convenience store, a convenience store of 3,600 square feet in the ITE trip generation manual is predicted in the morning peak hour to generate 225 trips. 50% more than the gas station convenience store with the same size convenience store. All right, and part of that is a matter of data sampling and where it comes in. The appropriate technique to use is to look at all your possibilities and make the most conservative assumption for your analysis. All right, In this case, knowing that you have a use on this site that could be expected to generate 225 trips, when you're putting the same use in with gas and then using 146 trips, is not consistent with the guidance of the trip generation handbook and how to do trip generation. The key is you got to look at the spectrum of what you're dealing with. The concept, theoretically, of adding gas pumps to a convenience store and having trips go down is counterintuitive. So the key is the trips actually for the gas station convenience store component in the morning peak hour could be expected to be 40% higher, in my opinion,
Then what?
than was used in the analysis in the traffic study. The PM peak hour was actually very close. 175 trips were used in the PAR study, 177 for a convenience store with no gas. But then again, if you increase the size of the convenience store by a small amount or the number of viewing positions by 1, the trips jump up. It's just the nature of where the data cutoff line was.
But you have to make the analysis as to what is proposed, not what is potential.
Correct. However, there is a 3,600 square foot building that is mostly convenience store proposed. And that, according to the trip generation manual, produces 225 trips. So just because you have a land use category that tells you gas station convenience stores, where the convenience store is less than 4,000 square feet, would generate 146 trips, doesn't mean that it's appropriate to use that. It would be more appropriate to look at both uses and make an informed decision.
Because both uses are actually going to be taking place on the site.
Correct. Now, let's get to the coffee shop. A drive-through coffee shop with 400 square feet. The trip generation manual gives you data on trips per 1,000 square feet. If you look at the data plots, and that's in the handout you have, you can see there's almost no correlation. Things are all over the map. There's one data sample for the morning peak hour that is 400 square feet, and it had 110 trips. That's it when you look at the size. There's a graph in there.
What are you referring to?
So there's 4 different sheets. The appropriate one to look at would be morning peak hour based on 1,000 square feet.
Weekday?
Weekday peak hour, yes.
This is a
Well,
coffee donut
something.
shop?
Coffee donut shop, yes.
And just for the record, what is the coffee donut shop different than a drive-through with,
No, it's coffee donut shop with drive-through window.
no, the coffee shop is different than what I understand what Seasons is. So Seasons is not a Dunkin' Donuts. Seasons that's not what they're presenting. So I'm just curious as to what the definition of this coffee donut shop with a drive-through encompasses. Does it encompass like a Dunkin' Donuts or a?
Well, I'm sorry. Well, first of all,
I'm just curious.
this is the land use category chosen by PAR to analyze this site. They've decided that the land use is coffee donut shop. Coffee donut shop, Dunkin' Donuts is an example of them, but it's not the entirety.
Okay.
There are other varieties. There's a whole range in here. ITE doesn't get very specific on the brand, because brands can change. This board approves a land use, not an actual specific applicant or a specific vendor.
But the charts can be based on square footage of the facility and adjacent traffic.
That's where I was going next.
Okay.
So there's another category you can use, which is how much traffic is adjacent to the site to determine how many trips it could generate. In this case, in the morning peak hour, there are 1,014 vehicles that go through this intersection, will be predicted with the build traffic. That would generate 152 vehicle trips versus the 34 in the PAR study. A 5-fold increase.
Could I ask a question about that? So my understanding is when these traffic studies are done, one of the issues is there's traffic that you expect to be there every day, right? No matter what's there, you've got traffic. But when you do a traffic study, you make a distinction between traffic that's passing by every day and then traffic that's generated for people specifically going to that facility for that reason.
That is correct.
So did you do an analysis as to how much more traffic would be generated as a result of having this establishment there with the gas pumps and a drive-through and with a coffee shop? How much more traffic is potentially generated because now it becomes an attraction outside of the fact of just that there's traffic on the street every day? So we already know, basically, if I agree with your number, 1,114 on Sousa Road in the peak morning in the hour, right?
That's a combination of Main Road and Sousa Road.
All right, so that's both roads.
Correct.
So of those, that's what it is today.
Correct.
How
Well,
much more traffic would be generated because this shop is there and people want to go to it? In other words, I'm not just driving by and I might pull in. I actually want to go to this place first to get gas or whatever. It's like there was a term for it.
it's called pass-by trips.
Pass-by trips, I'm sorry.
What I will tell you is this. First of all, this land use is specifically geared towards pass-by trips. Gas station convenience stores are. Okay, that's their nature. But, and that may matter.
Pass-by meaning I'm already in the area, I'm going through, I'm just going to pull in.
Correct. And then there's also diverted trips, people that reroute it to get
Okay,
there.
okay.
There's all kinds of things. However, when you're looking at a microcosm like this, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's all traffic. Because here's the thing. If I was looking to see the impacts on Main Road 2 miles up the road, then the new trips may matter. But here, even the pass-by and the newly generated trips all go in and out of these driveways and turn and make turning movements or come on and off of Sousa. They make new turning movements because of the presence of this. As a matter of fact, the pass-by are almost worse because what they do is, well, no, they're not worse, but the point is they're turning in and they're turning out and not necessarily the same location because they're continuing on their trip. That's really more of a technique of how you assign the traffic and lay it out and where it's going to go. But ultimately, the trip generation matters because all of those turn into turning movements that affect the operations of this area in this corner. All of them. They're either affecting one of the driveways and/or the intersection of Main and Sousa and Schooner. I shouldn't leave out Schooner.
I have one question to follow up, if possible. Right, so we're just talking about the drive-through, and I know they've been trying to say the drive-through is not what like everybody thinks a drive-through because the brand is coming in. It's a different brand, and I don't want to name the brand. But for us, we have to take into consideration that these drive-through always changes. Like tomorrow, one closes, which is they had in their location in Fall River. One disappeared, and then 2 months later, 3 months later, a new coffee shop came in. When you do a traffic study, for us as a board, we have to take into consideration that not just what come in, we have to consider that that drive-through has a heavy traffic or will create a certain amount of traffic. Does that show, or does it take a brand and do count, like Dunkin' Donut, Mary Lou, Sip and Dip? It doesn't take that, it just says, this is what coffee donut shop will bring. And we have to think about it as a big number.
So within data from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, we never ask the brand. We ask the land use. Okay, so we apply the land use. And because you're right, brands change and things change. A drive-through, first of all, the trips are a combination. It's, okay, the 152 trips is half in, half out. So that boils down to 75 trips. Or 76 trips. That's going to be a combination of people using the drive-through and people going into the store. All right, that's the combination. That's the potential issue. The drive-through is really going to be, it's going to be all based on how fast they serve, all right, and how many people they can put through. The queuing is the effect of that. The difference between the arrival rate and the service rate defines what your queuing is going to be, and stacking. All right. Towards that end, since I'm on stacking briefly, I will also say that I did see an exhibit that's presented to this board showing how many vehicles could be stacked in this drive-through. They had the cars bumper to bumper. All right. They don't queue bumper to bumper, and especially not around curves. It presented that 10 vehicles could fit in here. No more than 8 could fit here. There's used 25 feet for vehicles in queuing, not 20. They basically stacked cars bumper to bumper. all right, if you look at that exhibit closely. And that's, people leave shy space between cars, and especially when you go around curves. They're not going to be bumper to bumper around a curve. So I think that this is, as designed, this has storage for eight vehicles at a time. So that's going to really depend, whether the queuing extends past it will be a function of how fast they can serve and the arrival rate. And I'm telling you that there's a data sample based on the amount of vehicles that come by a site, which is a valid variable within the Institute of Transportation Engineers that actually gives you a lot more data samples for 1,000 vehicles an hour coming by a site to predict how many people are going to stop for coffee. And queuing, there's some pretty well-established Institute of Transportation Engineers publications about queuing facilities. There's a Transportation and Land Development publication that was published in the late 80s that talks about, for fast food, which convenience store kind of falls in, that in some respects it tends to, that if the line gets longer than 15 to 20 minutes, people will not use it. And that if they go inside the store, that they'll be parked for 15 to 20 minutes. So that's the break even. At that point, if it's full, they either go in the store or wait for the next opportunity to buy coffee.
Have you been to any other local coffee drive-throughs to get some idea of what the wait time is or the number of cars that are queuing up?
I have not in this area.
Right, so I have a question. So sorry.
No, you go ahead. No, fine, go ahead.
No, you could go ahead, I'll finish it over.
I guess I just want to inquire, are you able to make these conclusions with a reasonable degree of professional certainty? You're using these trip generation, are you able to say, yes, I anticipate higher trip generation, and yes, I anticipate more queuing than the pair report suggests, based on the information you have before you and the board has before it tonight?
I am able to say with engineering certainty that the trips, if you look at the entirety of the trip generation possibilities, will be much higher. All right, that I can say with a reasonable degree of engineering certainty that I expect the morning peak hour traffic, instead of being 180 trips, to be closer to 377 trips, based on that information, more than double. And the afternoon, I could say with a reasonable degree of engineering certainty that there was 191 trips predicted. I could estimate that it should be 254 trips, should have been used for analysis,
Okay,
for a 33% increase.
I'm sorry, and that's based upon the 2013 reports?
No, that has nothing to do with count data.
Okay.
That has to do with trip generation data analyzed properly, such as looking at the highest trip generation for one of the two land uses for the convenience store gas station, and for looking at a coffee shop based on the amount of traffic passing by it.
Adjacent traffic.
Adjacent traffic. And combining them in an appropriate manner for analysis. And the appropriate manner for analysis is to use the higher or more conservative trip generation rate that is possible.
And did you make that calculation?
I made that calculation.
Okay.
I have a question for follow-up on that. Is there like a standard practice for an engineer to decide that? Like,
So-
why are your numbers different than the other party's engineer?
The standard practice comes into play when you read the trip generation handbook that describes how to use the data. And it talks about professional judgment in reviewing trip generation categories and the independent variable to use. Independent variable would mean square footage in one case, adjacent traffic in another. So those are the judgment. It tells you that you need to consider the entirety of your possibilities and pick the most appropriate. And if you're doing a traffic impact study to advise about impacts, instead of trying to cherry pick the, shall we say, the one that works best for what you're presenting, that produces the least traffic, it's more appropriate to give the entirety of the range or the high end to the board for consideration.
Oh, I had one more question. It was about queuing. You mentioned that what should have been determined for queuing is 25 feet and not 20 feet. Is that also a standard practice for engineers? Should they use 25 feet and not 20 feet? Or
Yes.
is that just your own
Sorry, I should have let you
opinion?
finish your question.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that is a published number.
Okay.
That is published as, when you're studying queuing,
Yeah.
that you use 25 feet for vehicle.
Okay.
Whether it's at a signalized intersection or a drive-through. The key is, vehicles range in length from the low end, probably 14 feet, I know there's some vehicles are smaller, to 14 to 15 feet, all the way to like 18 to 19 feet. Parking spaces are usually 18 feet long, and then you've got your occasional vehicle, the design vehicle you usually use is a Lincoln Town Car, I believe, which is 19 feet long. All right, so that's the range of vehicles, but you don't park bumper to bumper. You leave shy space. Usually you try to make sure you can see enough of the front of the vehicle to know you're behind it. So that interstitial space ranges from like 6 to 9 feet between vehicles. So in queue, when it's just passenger cars and not trucks and others, you assume 25 feet per vehicle for queuing.
Thank you.
Question. If you had the pumps in the convenience store, but you didn't have the drive-through, how would that affect things?
Well, that's an interesting question, right? So, I mean, when I look at this site, there's over 3,000 square feet of impervious space dedicated to the drive-through, the stacking for the drive-through, and some space in the building. On a site that has probably like 36 to 3,800, or 36 to 38,000 square feet of impervious, that's a lot for something that was supposedly going to generate only 34 trips. There's only 17 cars an hour to come in and out. Like 17 individual cars going in to get coffee in an hour. So the key to me is that based on the ITE data, and if you go off adjacent street traffic, you're looking at 152 trips in the morning, 77 in the evening peak hour. All right, that's almost half of the trip generation I'm predicting for this site for that one use. My first impression of this site, based on reviewing site plans and everything else, is that that's the one extra element that shouldn't have been on this plan. The site's too small for it.
Go ahead, Dave.
But that's just an impression, not a technical, calculated opinion.
We're kind of at a position now where we have two traffic analyses, each one based on a different traffic generation model. The one that SPAR, is that what?
PAR.
Is it PAR or PAR?
PAR.
PAR. The one that PAR used, and the new one you presented, which is the ITE model. And the model that PAR has used is the one that we are used to. That's the one we have seen for many, many, many years. Matter of fact, we've never seen any other model used. And in fact, I went back and looked at some of the data that we have had collected from other projects, and they have all used the same model as PAR. So now we have to decide which of these two models is right. Both, I know you're an expert witness, and you obviously favor the ITE model. But I'd like to know a little more about the ITE model and where it has come from and why it's considered to be a leading model in trip generation predictions. I need to get a better feel for the fact that this is a better model than, I know you've given a lot of examples already, but what I haven't seen is any evidence that would suggest that it's become a standard.
So PAR, in their study, used ITE for trip generation.
Didn't they use this, what is it, the what was it? Unfortunately, I don't have a note of the model they used, but it was a model that has been created by an organization of highway, state highway, and federal highway engineers.
So there's two different types of analyses that were in PAR's study. There is the trip generation, which was based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers data. I have used the same source, but different land use categories for descriptions or different variables. Same source. The other analysis technique you're talking about is for capacity analysis and intersection operations. And that is I'm sorry, yeah, I spoke too fast. Sorry, that's for capacity and traffic operational analysis. And that is the highway capacity software, which is the incorporation of the highway capacity manual. So they're two different things to analyze, two different components of the project.
Well, unfortunately, I can't think of the name of the model.
Is it the Transport Impact Assessment, TIA?
No. It was something like HH
ASHTO.
or A, I'm sorry?
Is it ASHTO?
Do you want this?
There is a third component, which had to do with measuring the site triangles, and that was from the American Association of State and Highway Transportation Officials,
That's the
ASHTO.
model I'm referring to.
That's not a model, that is a design guidebook, and it gives you guidance on recommended site distance at intersections based on speed. And PAR did do that and analyzed it. They found that the site triangles could be made sufficient for the speed of traffic with trimming of branches. But
So you're saying that both you and PAR have used the same model, the ITE model, for delays and the only difference is because the data, well, you're saying they incorrectly used the model, I think.
first of all, it was for trip generation, not delays or operations. They used the Institute of Transportation Engineers data handbook, the trip generation manual, to predict trips. And yes, I'm saying that they used it incorrectly.
Okay. Thank you.
I have just a few more questions.
Good luck.
Really, you talked a little bit about level of service and turning. So I have a couple of questions about bus stops. Is there a way to analyze traffic disruption caused by buses, such as school buses traversing Main Road? And was this done by PAR?
So there was no consideration for school buses in the analysis. There's not a direct technique to do it, but there's a way around it.
Go ahead.
Essentially what happens is this. When you have a bus stop and people are not allowed to pass it, if you're not allowed to pass a bus, a moving bus, which for the safety of the children, there's no question about that. Well, then all traffic more or less stops. And if that stretches back through this intersection, everything is shut down. All right, so if you can predict how many minutes you lose, like let's say you lose 3 minutes an hour, that's 5% reduction in your hour. You can predict what's really happening with your model by factoring up your volumes accordingly to be able to analyze, okay, I've only got 57 minutes of moving traffic as opposed to 60 minutes. So you can go and adjust for buses. For traffic signals, there's actually an analysis technique where you can consider a bus blocking a lane. All right, it's made for city buses, really, but you could use it. But that's traffic signals. So for unsignalized, you'd have to basically, if you have a lot of school bus activity, that is something that could be taken into consideration and adjusted for and given an answer.
What about the fact that this road has no turn lanes? Is there any impact that might have on traffic flow?
Yes. First of all, the ASHTO manual, the policy on geometric design by the American Association of State and Highway Transportation Officials gives warrants for when you should put a left turn lane in. A left turn on Main Road here to Souza is actually like warranted tenfold. 10 times, like, it's got 10 times the volume of when AASHTO would recommend a left turn lane. Left turn lanes they improve traffic operations and they improve safety greatly. The key is, if somebody is waiting to turn left, then through traffic can continue. Otherwise, the through traffic is stopped. If they're stopped, they can't move. The left turning vehicles, that takes them out of the flow. It also helps improve sight triangles if you had two people trying to turn left across from each other. Because when they try to turn left across from each other, if they're not aligned, they have issues with their sight lines. So there's a known safety benefit to putting left turn lanes in. It's quantifiable. It is a great safety enhancement, and it improves operations.
Do you know whether it's legal to go around a vehicle that's stopped in traffic by using the breakdown lane in Rhode Island?
So I reviewed the traffic laws of Rhode Island in preparation for tonight. It specifically says that it is illegal to leave the traveled way to bypass a left-turning vehicle. Anything on the to the right of the edge line is not the regular traveled way. Use the word breakdown lane, I'd use the word shoulder. Furthermore, I reviewed the testimony of Mr. Shevlin talking about, well, there's 16 feet, so people can get around each other. That would be asking people to basically pass each other in an area narrower than two parking spaces. Parking spaces are typically 9 feet wide. Vehicles do range in size, with the widest ones being 8 feet 2 inches, but then there's about a foot for mirrors. This is for trucks or buses or whatever. The key is that's not really enough, and that also assumes that people are lined up exactly with their mirror on the edge line, all right, to be able to get around them and have that. I'm not aware of anyone who would consider 16 feet lane sufficient for two vehicles passing each other.
So we had submitted a citation to that general law, and I just want the record to reflect that it's Rhode Island General Laws 31-15-16. As Mr. Meth testified, it prohibits the use of the emergency breakdown lane for travel. That's our Rhode Island general law.
So you've talked about the amount of cars and everything, and I asked the question for the other gentleman. The fact is, we drive a lot more different since COVID. Our habits different. We speed up. The highway is faster. The road is faster. Do you ever I know you didn't do the traffic study, but you went and sat there. You said, do you see the increase in speed, how Main Road is, or these regular roads that used to be 35 unfollowed or 40 miles unfollowed? When you look at your traffic, or you both looked at the traffic, and I asked the same question, the speed is different. Do we take into consideration coming downhill, trying to take a left when they cannot pass people, or a bus, or the people trying to get out? That speed itself is an issue, isn't it, on that road?
I don't know if I can answer that specifically for this location. I can say that there has been, first of all, traffic fatalities since COVID have increased substantially to over 40,000 a year, okay, all traffic fatalities, versus having been around 30,000 back around 2014 or 2013. A substantial increase. And many research papers I've looked at attribute that to higher speeds. All right, the key is we do have a speeding problem in this country. And because with specific to pedestrians and bicyclists, the number killed has actually almost doubled since 2011, per year. Went from about 5,000 a year to over 8,000. And part of that, though, is the number of serious injuries went down, meaning that that is an increase in kinetic energy being transferred. And the kinetic energy equation is based on the mass of the vehicle and the velocity squared, double the velocity. So the increased speed and more pedestrians get more injured, including fatally. You increase the size of vehicles, which has also been a trend. Vehicles have gone from, used to be, back around 2014, it was 50-50 between passenger cars and light trucks, which include SUVs and minivans, to 80% light trucks and minivans. Those are the causal factors of the increase in fatalities. But speeding is definitely become an issue post-COVID based on the impact of fatalities and the uptick in the number of times that police officers in those fatal crashes have cited speeding as a consideration. Those are the data samples I have to answer your question. I cannot answer the specifics because I haven't studied it about sight distance and the playoff of speed and whether something has changed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Meth. Do you have an opinion as to whether this application meets the standards of the Town of Tiverton ordinance, specifically as regards the requirements for the Section 4 for special use permits?
So my opinion about that Section 4, I believe it talks about hindrance or endangerment of vehicles and pedestrians.
Yes, would it hinder or endanger pedestrian movement in the neighborhood?
It would hinder movement in the neighborhood. What I have specifically found, contrary to Mr. Shevlin's testimony, is that delay for the worst movement on Sousa can be, that whole approach can be expected to increase by at least 11 seconds when you correct for the trip generation and the fact that the left turn into the site is functionally going to work with the intersection of Main Road and Sousa Road. So 11 seconds versus the 1 to 2 seconds that Mr. Shevlin testified to. And that it is operating at level service E, but the very top end of level service E would be what I'd predict it to operate at.
And is it your opinion that it would also endanger pedestrian movement in the neighborhood?
I testified already about the proposed crosswalk location.
So that's a yes?
That would be a yes based on the crosswalk shown on the plan and the reasons I cited in my testimony.
Do you have any opinion on whether, if permitted, the proposed use would increase traffic hazards or cause additional hazardous traffic conditions?
When it comes to safety, one of the predictive measures is conflicts. How many conflict points come into each other? This site introduces several new conflict points with fairly high volumes in peak hours, and for that reason, I would have to say yes, it does.
Do you believe that existing traffic congestion would be aggravated if this project was permitted?
To the extent that level of service is the measure of congestion, then yes, as I testified already, the level of service impacts on Sousa Road are far higher than predicted. And I believe an 11-second increase on something that had a delay before that of 30-odd seconds in peak hours, that's a significant increase. That's about a third increase. That means every person going through that intersection on Sousa Road now will have to wait 33% longer, plus or minus.
Do you have any conclusion as to whether the public convenience and welfare would be served by the uses proposed in this application?
I don't have an opinion with regard to what the site will offer the public. That's more of a planning question. To the extent that the difference between the no build condition and build condition is so large that I do not believe that the public good is served from a traffic perspective.
I have nothing further.
Exactly, a quick question. On the bus, you criticized the PAR report for not having done the bus analysis. Have you done the bus analysis? Is anything in your testimony today? I know you didn't submit a written report. Did you do the bus analysis as to how the busing might affect queuing on Main Road?
No, I didn't. To do that properly, I'd have to actually go measure some buses for an hour and see how long they interfered with traffic, which is the kind of thing that when somebody does a traffic count, they would usually note in, like, for under comments about traffic wasn't moving for a certain number of minutes because of school bus.
Thank you.
Mr. Meth, it is fair to say that the data concerning the buses that serve the school children of the town of Tiverton is available, and you did review it, is that correct?
I did review it, but
Okay.
what it didn't tell me is how long buses stopped.
Right, but you would agree, and it is a matter of record, that the high school, middle school, and grammar schools all use Main Road for, to transport students, correct?
I did see that within the buses. There was, each of the schools had up to 8 buses. And at least some of them, there were several stops on Main Road.
Thank you.
Just one question, Madam Chair. If you could zoom in on that,
Zoom in or zoom out?
I want to see more of the picture.
Let's zoom out.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so you talked about the queuing of cars, vehicles that are going to be using the drive-through. And believe your testimony is that maybe 8 at the most, whereas PAR suggested to be 10. And your basis of that is because you need this interstitial, I like that word, between, a space between vehicles. So if vehicles were queued in front of the entrance and exit of Sousa, is that going to affect traffic, the ability for cars to get in and out?
Given the site layout and given the size of the site, if this queue, if somebody pulled in to get at the back of the queue and there were already vehicles in the area I'm showing, which is by the end of the drive-through queuing and adjacent to the parking spaces, the entrance driveway on Sousa would be effectively blocked.
And so all that excessive traffic, turning and all that is going to be transferred now to Main Road, because they're not going to be able to get in and out on Sousa, so they're going to, if they want to get in, they're going to have to use the Main Road entrance and exit. Is that correct?
I can't say with certainty where the impacts would be, but I would say that it would not be as the designer intended flow to be.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question I was gonna ask for queuing, and I waited. Can I ask it now? So we struggled, me and the attorney, and he gave me what I wanted to put a divider on that road and everything. I'm sorry, we've talked before, me and the attorney, about dividing Sousa Road entrance, and he did it, and they did a good job doing it, but I still have the same concern. When a customer pulls in, even if they don't come from Main Road, I want to ask you about your traffic expertise. People don't know how, it's, the design for the drive-through purposely done to hide how many cars waiting. If the customer could see there's 10 cars waiting, they're not even coming into the site. So they hide a lot of the cars behind, and all the customer would see is 2 cars showing as they're coming off Main Road. Unless you start going there all the time, eventually you know this is how long the drive-through and everything. And my feeling is, the question to you is, I had asked them, why did they move the building from where it was originally to it is right now for traffic? Because now allows the traffic coming from Sousa Road again, because originally they put that divider to make it tighter for them to go in. It's allowed people to go through Sousa Road again and be able to make a full turn into that drive-through. Am I right about that? Like, I feel like literally now you could go down there, make a turn, and make Sousa Road as part of the queuing. I could be totally wrong, but I feel like when that building was moved, allowed that motion again.
So what I would say is this. First of all, the previous iteration of the plan I saw was terrible. It didn't have a bypass, and the loading space obstructed a good portion of the parking that was in the back, all right? They've added a bypass lane so that all of a sudden you can access the parking in the back if there's queued vehicles. Before, it was just one lane, and if the queuing for the drive-through backed up, there was no access to the rear, which would have left delivery trucks potentially waiting across Sousa Road driveway to get in, or people trying to maneuver out of parking spaces. I believe they had the bypass on the exit, but not at the entrance. All right. I'm not sure if there was ever a deliberate attempt to hide queues, or that there was a deliberate attempt to make Sousa part of the queue storage. I'm just advising the board that you can store 8 cars in the site, and the experience published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers is that people won't wait more than 15 to 20 minutes. The missing variable is the service rate. How fast can they serve customers? All right, fast food service time quoted, and fast food is not necessarily coffee. 2 minutes is what's been published as potential service time. In this case, it may be quicker because it's not a whole bunch of items. It's, or a lot of times it's just coffee made a certain way. There's also a difference between where they make you wait. Do they take a bunch of orders and let you line up past the order station? Because there's 3 of the vehicles are behind the order station. Or do they make you wait by the order station and do them one at a time? That could affect the queuing as well. All right, because if I point to the exhibit, this concrete pad is where your orders are fulfilled. This concrete pad is where orders are placed. It's an operational decision about, do they take the orders one at a time and serve people, or do they take a bunch and make them line up here? That's going to be an operational decision. Traffic engineers, we have no control over that.
But the border was, the board to order is just off Sousa Road.
I thought, reviewing the site plans, that the order board is here, but I could be mistaken on that.
The order board is right at that entrance, and they take an order there, no?
Mr. Meth's understanding is correct. The order board is at the back pad.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think he wants a few minutes.
Mr. Stoltman, how much time do you need? Do you need a break?
No, I'm happy to go.
Okay.
If I'm a little hesitant between questions, please forgive me. And may I leave my jacket off?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That was an option.
Yeah, Mr. Meth, feel free to take off your jacket. We're not going to be here
No,
that
no,
long,
that's
actually.
all right.
I literally only have about half a dozen questions, and they're going to be kind of yes and no questions. But partially because I haven't had the chance to see any of your data, and so I didn't have the opportunity to prepare any type of rebuttal with Mr. Shevlin. And as I understand it, you haven't done any of your own counts, and you say that's not necessary because you're relying on the studies. That's correct, the ITE trip generation studies by use.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And basically, you're saying either Mr. Shevlin is incompetent or is being dishonest about how he implemented those studies. Is that correct?
I don't think I'd use those specific words. I would say that he wasn't as conservative as he ought to have been.
Okay. Is it possible that we might see the analysis? We could request that of council, but so we could actually understand what suppositions and assessments or assumptions you made in applying these, rather than just the conclusions of trips generated by the ITE study?
So first of all, I believe that when Mr. Shevlin prepared analysis of potential alternative uses, he looked at a convenience store by itself. I could be mistaken on that. So to the extent that that trip generation rate, that is in his study.
Right. Is that accurate? Is that accurate?
What I looked at from his study on that was accurate, yes.
Okay.
He just did not make the connection between, well, I believe he used a different size convenience store.
Right.
He used like 5,000 instead of 3,200, so 3,600.
Right.
So the data I relied on would be the trip generation, the same trip generation rates that supported that.
But wouldn't that would be a little more conservative,
If-
using more square feet, wouldn't it?
Could I please finish my answer, sir?
Oh, I thought you did, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. For the coffee shop item, we submitted to the board the data sheets, the analysis sheets from the ITE trip generation. So you've had those available for some time.
Yes, yeah, we have had the 4 pieces of paper that are the data sheets. Can you tell us the types of coffee shops and donut shops that not types in terms of brands, but were they standalone? How big, were they on highways? Were they with gas stations with 8 pumps?
First of all, there's not necessarily, there's no indication in the data about whether they were standalone or combined with other uses. From a trip generation collection standpoint, it is very difficult if you have many uses on a site to distinguish what goes with what. And it's the exact same category of land use that Mr. Shevlin used in his analysis in his report.
Okay, so when you're comparing to no build, then what do you mean by no build?
A no build is a scenario that is analyzed, which means you don't build anything on a site.
All right, and you're aware that this site is zone general commercial and is permitted by right for a 4,000 square foot convenience store?
I'm not aware of the specifics, but I am aware that it was analyzed that way by Mr. Shevlin.
Okay, so what is the incremental impact only, just the incremental impact of 360 square feet of coffee shop and the gasoline pumps?
Well, based on, first of all, I believe the number was 400 square feet, not 350. The trip generation that I calculated was 152 trips in the morning peak hour versus 34 predicted by Mr. Shevlin. So the incremental impact would be an additional 128 trips. Wait, did I get that? Sorry, 118 trips.
All right, it doesn't seem apparent to me from your 4 charts. We'll offer rebuttal testimony that when I looked at the charts, and if you take 4/10 of 1,000, 40% of 1,000 at these different times, these charts show a wide disparity of trip generation based on both on times. So, but you're acknowledging there's a linear progression on those per 1,000 square feet?
What that chart reflects is, well, there is a linear projection, and ITE gives an average rate
Yeah.
based on 1,000 square feet. Those were 2 of the charts, one for the morning and one for the afternoon. And those are the ones that Mr. Shevlin relied on. And they show it, but they do not give a statistical fit to the data. It is all over the place.
Okay. Now, you also criticized the basic count methodology, which I understand why, because we've been talking about the difference between trips counted during COVID, post-COVID, and pre-COVID. So what I don't understand is all the emphasis we put on the school. So, because didn't you also testify that the biggest day of trips is Saturday?
Okay, no, I did not testify.
Oh, I thought, well, so isn't Saturday the trip generation day that gave you concern?
There has been no analysis for Saturday, so I don't know what the impacts are. And the previous study that we did submit as evidence, the 2013 VHB study, did indicate that Saturdays were almost as busy, the Saturday peak hour, not the Saturdays themselves, the entire day. The Saturday peak hour is almost as busy as the weekday evening peak hour and far busier than the morning peak hour, the weekday morning peak hour. That's what I testified to.
All right. All right, I apologize for, I literally am confused by this, though, because I don't understand that if, I understand the buses, you know, and the buses turning, we've got to pay attention to that. But your testimony is that the weekday traffic and the Saturday traffic are either comparable or Saturday traffic's irrelevant?
No, I did not testify that.
Okay, I apologize. Please explain that again.
No, I'll let you finish your answer, your
No,
question. so-
please explain to me the Saturday difference.
What I said was, there's been no analysis of Saturday conditions. And that previous studies have shown that Saturday traffic Saturday peak hour traffic, which is usually mid-morning or midday, is higher than the morning weekday peak hour.
Oh, okay.
And it is it is almost as high as the weekday evening peak hour, and so it is a significant hour, and that standard practice for retail-type operations is to look at all peak hours, including Saturdays if it's retail.
Oh, okay, okay. So which are the previous studies? What are the previous studies that you're referring to?
The previous study in question that analyzed Saturdays was the VHB study from 2013.
Okay, now let's have some fun. Let's turn to the 2013 VHB study. What was the size of that project? How many square feet was that project? Would you be surprised to know it was 455,000 square feet of retail space?
It may take me some time to find the answer.
I can direct you to it. It's on page 1 of the VHB study. The
Just for the record, we're now referring to what has been marked as,
Exhibit 1.
thank you.
The proposed project will construct a 454,481 square foot mixed-use development.
Yeah, it's not a retail development, it is a mixed use, which
Right.
means a combination.
And are you aware there were 2 entrances to that project, proposed project? And if you've reviewed that, there were 2 entrances off Sousa Road on that project?
To be clear, I did not use this study, the VHB study, for anything except for looking at the historic data that they collected at the intersection of Main Road and Sousa Road and Schooner Drive.
Okay, well, let's use that then. This study, the VHB study, at page 19, with the build, the 455,000 was going to go all the way from Sousa Road down to the highway, 500,000 square feet of mixed-use development, has a whole section on traffic mitigation, 2 entrances on this Sousa Road, on Sousa Road, at this area. And it states at page 19, with the proposed site-generated trips under the 2018 build conditions, the Sousa Road westbound left turn through right turn movements will continue to operate at a level of service C during the weekday morning peak hour. So I mean, I'm having trouble contemplating the end of Western civilization as we know it today, based on the 4,000 square foot convenience store with a coffee shop when the convenience store is permitted. So how do we reconcile that?
The VHB study was for a very specific project, which was not the proposed project. The proposed project happens to be adding turning movements directly at the intersection of Main Road, Sousa Road, and Schooner Drive. So in terms of reconciling, there's really nothing to reconcile. It's apples and oranges.
And the recommended reconciliation was a left turn lane at the corner of Sousa and Main for that much development, right? And a monitoring for potential future signalization. Isn't that the VHB study's conclusion?
I didn't review the VHB study in its entirety because that was not my area of interest. My area of interest was a data sample of traffic conditions at one point in time pre-COVID.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just want to make, I don't want to duplicate questions, so if you give me a second. Sure. So we circled back to the corner of Sousa and Main a couple of times. With respect to the crosswalk, are you aware that there's still an ongoing planning component to this project that would require us that would require the applicant to go back to the planning board for preliminary and final planning approval for final design of crosswalks and the like?
I have no expertise in the process for approval of projects in Tiverton.
That's, okay, so as a transportation expert licensed in Rhode Island, what are the criteria for the State Traffic Commission approval of this crosswalk?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, but you are aware that the PAP approval, as well as the June 6, 2023 letter just approved, stated that the revised plan now includes an uncontrolled crosswalk. Please be aware the newly proposed crosswalk will require STC approval prior to the permit being issued. That's on the June 6, 2023, paragraph 2.
Preserve Tiverton number 2.
Preserve it to 22. So this still has municipal and state review in addition to the PAP that's been issued.
Once again, I have no expertise in the approval process.
Okay, thank you. I probably shouldn't do this because we're trained not to ask questions we don't know the answer to. But let me ask you this. What is the data, what is the manual I can look at that tells me that 25 feet versus 20 feet is the queuing?
So the one publication you can look at, which addresses drive-throughs very explicitly, would be Transportation and Land Development by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, Chapter 8.
Okay, so we'll look at that. Thank you. And even if the queuing were 8 instead of 10, have you, and the chair, I think, asked you this question, what observations have you made about, what, on 400 square foot coffee shops adjacent to or connected with, pertinent to, a convenience store, what's the average queuing for this? The IT, I know you use the IT for trip generation, but what do you use for average queuing for a regional drive-by convenience store like this?
So
You pass by main road corridor. It's a busy street, we'll acknowledge that.
I'm sorry, just waiting. Are you finished?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was also responding to some chattering going on in the audience, I apologize.
Okay, thanks. I'm not unaware of any source, ITE or otherwise, that gives definitive information on queuing.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me one second.
I don't have any further questions, thank you.
Anything further?
If you could turn to page 19 of that VHB report, let's make sure all of the conclusions are in evidence, could we? So, Main Road at Souza Road and Schooner Drive. It's fair to say that the Saturday mid-peak hour periods at Schooner Drive are the critical movements, is that correct? That's paragraph 1 on page 19, under Main Road and Schooner Drive. See that conclusion?
Yes, I do.
All right. And what is the anticipated level of service there? E.
Yes. it is
Okay.
E.
And then the next paragraph, Schooner Drive eastbound, again, this is focusing on the left turns and right turn movements that are projected. What's the level of service? This is paragraph 3, last sentence. What's the projected level of service?
Level service F.
F. And right after where my brother stopped reading, the Schooner Drive eastbound left turn, right turn movements are protected to operate under level F for what time periods? Could you read that last sentence for the record, please?
Weekday evening and Saturday midday peak hour periods.
What level of service?
It said level service F, which
I
is
have nothing
failing
further.
conditions.
Karen, can I just ask you a question? I don't want to, I just want to understand what his testimony was. What you just read from, at least the last paragraph, it says, with the proposed site generator trip, with the proposed site as in his proposal. In other words, as proposed, which was encompassing this entire proposal. They
Right.
came to those conclusions.
Right, and based on all of the elements contained in that report, it's not just keyed to the square footage of the development, it's keyed to all the things we've discussed and tried to present tonight, the pass-by trips, the existing traffic, the whether or not you can turn. We really do need, and we do ask, that you read the entire report and not just cherry-pick any of the data or any of the conclusions. That's the only reason
Yeah.
I came up.
And I just want to clarify, and I believe the witness testified, the only thing that they used in this report was the data on the roadway, the traffic counts on the roadways.
That is the only method, that is the only component that I've used, other than I did testify that that report did project the intersection of Main Road and Souza Road and Schooner Drive to operate at level service F.
Based upon the proposed development that's in this report.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify that because it was a little
Yes.
confusing to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Mr. Stolzer? Oh,
No, I don't have any redirect. The 2013 report was for 455,000 square feet of development on, between Souza Road and Route 24. Thank you.
does any member of the board have any questions of the witness? Any member of the audience have any questions of the witness? You can come up and identify yourself, please.
Madam Chair, I just, we have an expert here this evening, our planner. It's nearing 9 o'clock. He just had a recent, his wife gave birth recently. I don't think we're gonna reach him until well after 9. His testimony is not gonna be complete, certainly not direct and then cross. Would it be permissible that he leave and he comes to the next hearing?
Yes.
Thank you. Young dad.
Congratulations.
He's not that young.
And he just took the bar, waiting for his results. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, sir, you can come up here and ask your question. Where did he go?
Sat down.
Gerhard Leib, 300...
Identify yourself, please.
Yes, Gerhard Leib. Gerhard? G-E-R-H-A-R-D. Leib, L-E-I-B. 320 Old Colony Drive, Terrace, about a mile from the site. My question for the witness is, in the projections that you were doing for the additional trips that are going to happen in the future, given and known is that there'll be 500 additional units, from what I understand, being built at the corner of Souza and Fish. Were those, the trips from those 500 units considered in with the projections that you had seen or you were making?
I don't know the specific answer to that. I know that the PAR study did consider background traffic to do no build. Let me just verify that it had that development in it. That's not the Bayview condominium, is it?
I don't know the name.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't answer questions for the witness, okay? It's for the witness to answer if he knows.
So if that is not the Bayview condominium project, I do not see any evidence that, in that additional project you mentioned was included.
And if it were included, do you have an idea how many additional trips would come to the corner of Sousa in Maine?
That's not a question I can answer without basically studying the project and predicting the traffic and directing it in various
Okay, thank you.
directions.
Then one last easy question. From what I'm seeing here, there are going to be turns of traffic leaving the site onto Main up there, the upper part of that U-shape or horseshoe shape. And as those trips go, then heading south on Main Road, cutting across the traffic coming down Main Road, cutting across the traffic going up Main Road. Is there any analysis been done as how that flow interferes with traffic and could cause accidents?
So the analysis of that driveway has been included within the park traffic study.
Okay.
As I believe I testified earlier, when it comes to predicting crashes based on additional turning movements, that is not a robust and easy thing to analyze.
Understand. Thank you.
There's more conflict points, which is used by some as a proxy for safety. Proxy for safety, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up and identify yourself.
Jen Fernandez, I'm a member of Preserve Tiverton, and I live approximately, and maybe 40 feet from the Preserve site, directly across the street at 1049 Main Road, Tiverton, Rhode Island. I have a question, and I guess it's a little difficult to answer because we've never seen an official rendering of this proposed seasons, but the trips coming in and out of the proposed site, there's driveways, my driveway, my neighbor's driveway, a driveway on Sousa Road. My concern is at the evening hours, in addition with the lights on the site, is when these cars are trying to leave the driveway and those headlights and their blinkers are on, those are gonna flash in all our windows. Now, if I just do the math at 90 trips an hour, that's every 40 seconds. The light flashing in my house. Am I correct? At 90 trips, I'm gonna have to deal with a flashing light in my window. Every 40 seconds at 90 trips an hour. Every 40 seconds, when people's headlights are on, I'm going to have to look at those lights shine in my windows.
That's not within my area of expertise. That's probably, or anything I've studied.
Okay.
That may be a better question for the site engineer, for the applicant.
Okay.
But it might be too late.
So the math on that would be correct, at, like, being very conservative, if 90 trips came in, that would be every 40 seconds, a car would impact me from getting in and out of my driveway. And I'm being conservative here, at 90 trips. That would, when I do the math, I come up with 40 seconds. Every 40 seconds, I'm gonna struggle leaving my driveway because there's somebody leaving this proposed site.
Well, the proposal in the PAR study, in the evening peak hour, predicted 80 trips leaving that driveway, not 90.
Okay.
But otherwise, I guess, there's a vehicle leaving, and at some times a year, in the evening peak hour, it will be dark, and they will probably have to use their headlights.
Right. Okay. And then my other concern is you stated how you have concerns with the crosswalk. Do you feel that this intersection of Main Road, Sousa Road, and Schooner Drive has the potential to be a deadly intersection with pedestrians walking, with the build added onto Sousa Road, because people are going to want to walk down Schooner Drive to access the path for fishing off the dock, walking to the boathouse, and things like that? Do you think it has the potential to be a deadly intersection with people trying to turn and walk in that intersection?
When I talk about safety as a professional, I don't use the word deadly. But like I express my concerns about it as proposed. I have some concerns about it, but I have not done any analysis to turn that into a prediction of crashes.
Okay. And so that was my concerns about that. And could somebody answer, are we ever going to see a rendering of this proposed site so we could see how the lights are going to impact and how vehicles are, like, I would like to know, based on this trips, especially in the evening hours when I am trying to sleep or do anything, especially in the winter hours when it gets dark very early, how these lights are going to impact my
I don't think that's a
house.
question, an appropriate question for the witness.
Okay. I don't know who would answer, that. Okay. So I guess we'll just wait
the
to
planning
see
board would-
something.
If the special
There's
use.
no- there's
if-
no
hold on-
rendering.
Hold on, if a special use permit is approved, this would go back before the planning board for a preliminary plan approval, and issues of screening and those type of issues would all be addressed there. This is the rendering that's on file right now. This is what they have submitted. This could, subject to change, depending what the planning board does, if it gets that far. So, you know, we don't do anything with the site. This board has nothing to do with what the site looks like, you know, or what screening might be there. This is their best estimate of what it might look like, but this is certainly subject to change depending upon what the planning board may do. And at that stage, if they get that far, issues of screening and lights and stuff would certainly be before the planning board to protect your concerns. But that's not this board's purview right now.
Okay. So those were my questions that I had for
Thank you.
today. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Calabrese. I live at 14 Ocean View Avenue. I have a question that, and I'm not sure who answers it. There was talk tonight about having a left turn lane. How do you have a left turn lane when we just have a two-highway road?
What I testified to was that the guidebooks, there's a guidebook called, well, the American Association of State and Highway Transportation Officials published a guidebook called A Policy on Geometric Design within roads. Within that, they give a warrant for when a left turn lane should be considered on a cost-benefit basis. That the left turn lane, there's a certain combination of the left turn volume and the opposing volume that says when a left turn lane makes sense. And I said that the volumes at this location basically exceed that volume threshold or warrant by tenfold. It's 10 times as high as what would warrant a left turn lane. So I said that a left turn lane in this area would be a benefit, but there's no proposal to put it in. That was just a discussion about the fact that a left turn lane provides operational benefits. And it turns out, as we read it, that VHB in 2013 on the project they studied recommended it as a mitigation.
So I know what the left turn lane does, and I agree it does help in certain areas. But how would they put a left turn lane here? So would you have to get rid of the breakdown lane?
Well, first of all, the road is probably not wide enough. The road would need to be widened to accomplish it from what I've seen. All right, and that's how it would be accomplished. The shoulder could be narrowed or eliminated to accommodate it. That's a design decision that is made by the designer. That's nothing that I can, that I've studied and investigated and can answer tonight.
So that would be something that the Rhode Island DOT would have to do?
It's their road.
Okay.
So they would actually have to do it or have somebody, like say the applicant, prepare a plan for them to review and approve.
Okay, I was just curious how you do that on a two-lane road. And I just want to make a comment. I was delayed getting here tonight because of, there's a performance, it's a automobile repair shop. And so they were dropping a car off with a tow truck, but there was no place for them to park in that lot. And so they blocked the whole road to drop off a tow truck, a car that was on a tow truck. And not a big deal, it was 5 minutes. But I was down on East Main Road the other day when the Cumberland Farms down there was getting a delivery of pizza. So there's this tractor trailer that blocked all the lanes for a while until he was able to back up into the facility. So I'm trying to figure out how in this area a gas tanker's gonna get in there, and if it's a Seasons, which has lots of goods to sell, how all their trucks are gonna be able to get in and out of there after what I've witnessed. And I was in downtown Newport the other day and saw a Seasons on Wellington, and I was like, what a nightmare. I mean, Wellington is crowded enough. And trucks trying to get in there to drop off, water or soda or chips, whatever. And I'm thinking, how are they gonna do that with this facility on the corner of Sousa and Main Road? Are they going to have to block off the traffic every time they have a delivery of a tractor-trailer truck? I was blocked off there not long ago, well, it was a year ago probably, when a school bus had an accident with a car just north of Sousa Road. So what the police had to do was block off Main Road, and everyone had to go down Sousa Road. And then Sousa Road was backed up because people couldn't get out at the stop sign at the end of Sousa Road and Fish Road. So those are my concerns about a two-lane highway having this much traffic. And that's all I want to say. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. I had a friend that had an accident at the corner of Main Road and Sousa about 4 years ago, and she had life-altering injuries. Just something to consider. Thank you.
Carol Herman. I'm also a member of Preserve Tiverton. My property is within 300 feet of the proposed gas station project, and so I will be able to see the lights from my home. And getting into and out of my driveway will be impacted by any traffic congestion caused by the project. So, Mr. Meth, if I understand correctly, you concluded that the traffic congestion and the conflict points, or which could be considered hazards, would increase in this area of Main Road were this project to get built, due to the increase in traffic volume and the left-hand turns in particular. Is that correct?
I believe that's what I testified to, yes.
Okay. So my question is, can you say would the same increase in congestion and hazards with so many left-hand turns occur with other single-use projects that are permitted by right on that parcel, such as a barber shop or an insurance agency or a real estate office? Would you expect the same level of congestion and hazards to be created by those single-use projects which are permitted?
So the only reference point I have to address that question is the comparative use study performed by PAR. And within it, I believe they basically focused on the fact that this is mostly pass-by traffic, so that therefore those uses produced more primary trips or new trips. The pass-by versus new trips is not really relevant when it comes to the turning movements and the level of service delay, because the vehicle's paths are altered. So given that those comparative uses had less trips in several time periods, I'd have to go review it in detail. But my first impression is that even if the trips, the primary trips were higher, the total number of trips were lower than the proposed use was going to be.
And so,
And therefore, there'd be less conflicts with those permitted uses.
okay, thank you.
Hi, Jamie French, and I live at 48 Craig Avenue. I wanted to return to the school bus issue, and I wanted to ask if you were aware that the school bus does not stop off of Main Road, but that the school bus actually makes all of its stops on Main Road.
The school bus charts that I looked at, or schedules, specifically said Main Road in certain intersections. So my presumption would be that it actually stops on Main Road, therefore stopping traffic on Main Road.
They do, and they stop at every road that a student lives on. So sometimes it will stop and then drive, 400 feet and then stop again. And when the student's getting out, they also have to check twice under the bus to make sure there's no obstructions. And I wasn't sure if you were aware of that fact.
I'm not aware of the specifics of the school bus operation.
And also, if you were aware of the fact that there's sometimes 40 or 50 cars backed up on Main Road behind the buses when buses are letting students off.
I'm not surprised. The volume on Main Road is in the neighborhood of 1,000 vehicles an hour in two directions.
And I also came out to the same math that if one car is exiting or entering Seasons Market every 40 seconds, that there could be a backup of cars trying to get in and or out of Seasons gas station, further creating a larger issue.
The one thing I do know is, based on the analysis performed by PAR,
Yes.
that the exit driveway on Main Road, actually, they analyzed separate left and right turns, and the project's changed since then. So I don't have an exact number, but at that point, they were talking about a queue of 3.5 cars, and that was when they had a left turn lane. But now they've combined them left and right. So I don't know how long the queue would be for that.
I can read that. Thank you.
If I may just, I think Mr. Smith may have said that backward. There was originally left and right turns. Now there's an entrance lane and an exit lane.
I believe there was an iteration of the plan that I saw where there was an entrance, and then there were separate left and right turn lanes on the exit.
Right.
And I believe
This current plan has an entry lane and an exit lane. I just want to make sure we're all.
Yeah, no, it's the same plan, but I believe this has been modified from the version that had separate turn lanes because of a comment from the state.
Yes, sir.
Steve Money, 1049 Main Road, part of the preserve, 40 feet across the street. Which entrance is going to have the majority of the traffic?
The PAR study predicts Main Road would have the majority of traffic.
So when they say the coffee shop, everybody's going to be entering through Sousa Road, makes no sense. How far is the backup going to be from Main Road? And what coffee shop is going there? You put a Dunkin' Donuts, that's a destination. 2 miles up, Dunkin' Donuts puts people out on Main Road waiting.
Based on what I have to work with, it's basically agnostic with respect to the brand that goes in. Okay, it doesn't really specify a brand. And in terms of the backup, I testified that they can store 8 vehicles. I don't, before it starts backing up onto the site, I don't believe there is significant separation to Main Road, but as I testified, I'm not aware of any good definitive source to give a prediction on queuing. I think you really have to consider the service time and how many customers they serve within an hour. And I could tell you that the 17 vehicles that they predicted total for the going into the store and drive-through, there's other evidence that shows it could be 76 vehicles.
How far is it
Within an hour.
from the beginning of that Seasons building to the main road
I,
entrance?
I haven't done that specific measurement. That might be a better question for the site engineer. I don't know if there's another opportunity to ask him, though.
How far is it from curb to curb in front of my house? Is it 32 feet?
The dimensions I have on Sousa Road show that well, first of all, I don't know where your house is, sir.
It's the long driveway up top.
The long driveway up top, I believe the road is 32 feet wide right there.
Because I weed whacked the sidewalk, the breakdown lane is not that big at all. I don't see how a car could even get by there.
I believe the dimension I've measured is in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 feet.
That's definitely not right.
Can I just say something? You realize you're impeaching your own witness. This is a witness that's been offered by Preserve Tiverton. So I
I
understand
think
that.
he's pulling it from their stuff.
I understand. Well, you have a counsel here, and she asked her questions, but, I'm just saying, you are impeaching your own witness now. If that's what you want to do, that's fine.
I'm just telling you that's not
I
that,
understand.
you can't get by.
I understand.
I'm telling you reality, but you want the numbers, whatever. That's it. I'm disgusted.
Hi, I'm Gail Lawrence. I live on Long Pasture Way in Tiverton. I am a member of Preserve Tiverton. And I'm also a taxpayer and a person who drives this road frequently to do access services north of Sousa. My question keeps coming back because it is whether or not this gas station, convenience store drive-through is really aimed at the community that I'm a part of or at the traffic coming off 24. So, sir, I wondered if in any of your review of the PAR report, you discovered their analysis of the volume of traffic that would be generated by those customers whose destination was this business and they're coming off Route 24. Therefore, going north on Main Road, possibly looping around Sousa to get back on 24, or possibly coming down and then entering 24. Did anywhere in your review of their expert witness, was there any mention at all of the impact of that traffic and that volume of traffic, which Mr. Stolzman said a few minutes ago that this is a regional business, and I am deeply concerned about the absence of that analysis. So if you've seen it, I'd like to hear about it.
So the only data point I can give you or point to you is their distribution of trips and where new trips were added or not. And it looks like they've got 26 trips in the PM peak hour at least coming from the direction of Route 24. So that's the only basis I can say that, based on my expertise, tells me where people are coming from.
Okay.
That's
and-
26 inbound trips, and then more outbound, but the point being that, that's the direction.
Okay, and that's the sum total of their reference to the volume of traffic off 24 in the entire report that they submitted in support of this project, as far as your expert eye can discern.
Based on my recollection of reviewing the material, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jen Fernandez, member of Preserve Tiverton, 1049 Main Road. I had another question because that intersection, I know you don't like to use the word deadly, but you do express that there is a safety concern there. I have a question with it being a safety concern there. If it is a safety concern there and it does happen to attract a lot of accidents and a lot of accidents start happening there, who then comes into play to fix the issue of repeated accidents happen there? I have this question because we have this problem in Rhode Island already on North Main Street in Providence, where there's a task force involved, and $6 million the city needed to come up with to form this tax fund, this to form this task force to fix the issue at that intersection, because 4 people alone have died at that intersection. My concern is, like you addressed, that it is a safety issue, and if it does become a safety issue with repeated accidents, who's gonna come, are taxes gonna have to be increased, and is this a state thing? Does the DOT become involved? Is it the town? Who fixes the traffic?
This is beyond the witness's area of expertise.
Okay. I'm just wondering who would fix the traffic issue if it's a safety issue there. Does anybody on the board know that answer?
I certainly don't.
I don't want to speculate, but I'm aware of the issue of Providence because I work in that area, but.
Yeah. So it would be another task force, you would
No,
assume?
I mean,
With city council involved?
that was a group of residents that formed that task force to address the issue. There's a neighborhood association. You
The
know,
group of residents, because it says that it's by Providence City Councilor Sue Andevoice who chairs the task force.
Yeah, I know, but it was spearheaded by a group of I think it's called the North Main Street. There's a neighborhood group that started that, so.
Oh, okay, so the residents would have to form a group?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting that if there was a safety issue and it became a safety issue, then yes, this was a state road. I'm sure the town administrator would be involved, the police chief would be involved, they would be contacting the State Traffic Commission, and we'd ask for a study, but that's all speculative at this point.
Okay. And we would have to come up with like maybe 6 million in funds like them too to fix the issue?
That's speculation. I have no idea how much it would cost. If it would cost anything, maybe the state would pay for it. I have no idea. It's all
Okay.
speculation.
All right.
Hi, Sarah Troba, 8 Bridgeport Road, Trobaugh. One of the things I like about Tiverton is how easy and convenient it is to run up to the post office, to Humphreys, to CVS. I go up to that area frequently and am able to make a quick trip, except when the school buses are out, which, forget it, you have to plan your schedule around that. Let's be realistic about that. And I'm really wondering if that kind of convenience is going to be a thing of the past, if this comes to pass. Because of the discussion tonight about what if, how many trips here, how much of the coffee, how much is going to be the convenience store, how much of the gas stations, they're turning this way, they're turning that way. Well, I'm wondering if within the vast empire of Seasons facilities, there is a similar setup to what's being proposed here, that we could have a little more of a known things about the coffee shops,
Compare them.
I would think that within however many Seasons stations there are, there would be a similar setup to what we are looking at here, and we can get some more, much more specific answers to all these questions and speculations tonight about what already exists, certain situations. There's Seasons all over the place. How many do you guys have?
I'm happy to engage.
This is
Because as you know, we
an
provide
opportunity for.
comparable stores.
But I'm
At
just,
the last
This is an opportunity for you to ask this witness question.
I understand that.
Obviously, he's not familiar with.
I understand. It came into my mind with this discussion as it might be something where we could get some more
We agree with
specific, relevant answers in what it's disrupted.
Thank
I
you.
have a question, Lisa.
My name is Todd Cherry from 8 Bridgeport Road rear, and what's that? Cherry. Okay, and what my question is for the witness is, I'm just wondering, when we look at these studies, and as we look at these things, are you able to look at new traffic patterns being created because of high traffic areas where some people will form a new shortcut and go through a neighborhood that normally isn't traveled on because of the high traffic on a certain road? So what I'm saying is that the impact on certain neighborhoods that turn into a new traffic pattern because of the high traffic on Main Road, is that something you're able to consider or look at, or is that something that's just speculation and it's hard to know?
So it's easily the latter. That doesn't go into traffic analysis unless somebody deliberately puts it in. So following the normal path of generating traffic, assigning it to the road network, analyzing it, unless the traffic engineer doing the work decided to find out what if traffic diverts, what's the impact? So that would have to deliberately be part of the step. It was not part of the proposal that PAR did. I will also say that in a larger system, there are models that can be used to predict the redistribution of traffic. What happens is there's like an equilibrium that a traffic system will find where no matter which route you take, it takes about the same amount of time. And that's a much larger project, much bigger area that can be taken into consideration if you use a traffic model that does the equilibrium analysis and says, okay, I've increased this traffic on this so much that the delay's increased, therefore this route's shorter. And then it redistributes traffic until every route you take has about the same travel time.
Okay, thank you.
George?
I have a couple of questions. Sorry, I had mentioned a couple of things and just came up again. I don't understand about concern that this crossroad, this walk, we'll probably discuss it on Sousa Road with them too. But you had said something in passing that unless they put a flashing light, unless they put a stoplight or whatever the situation is, how is that become, I'm not asking you to give me, is that like something you've seen before? Does it come as we could put a walkway here, it's dangerous, whatever it is. Who puts that flashing light? Does the town decide or does the state decide? Have you ever seen it happen before?
Okay, so there's multiple different parts to your question.
I'm sorry.
Let me unpack a little bit. So I mentioned a way to enhance safety.
Right.
One technique that is effective at stopping vehicles is called a RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. And if you push a button to cross the street, it starts flashing. So if you have issues where, because of the left turning vehicle being in front of the crosswalk and blocking somebody's visibility, an approaching motorist, the flashing lights will at least tell them there's a pedestrian looking to cross. All right, that's one potential strategy. And I didn't really realize it until we started talking about it, but the biggest problem with that crosswalk is that it's not at an intersection. Because that's the only reason why left-turning vehicles would end up storing in front of it is because it's effectively mid-block in a block that's 40 feet long.
My second question.
So it's like moving it to the crosswalk would actually, all the way to the intersection, would improve the visibility.
Thank you.
And it's where there actually is a natural crosswalk.
I'll follow up with exactly, you just answered it. My question is, I don't know how much they're married to this. I know the state is involved, but that doesn't make them God and they know everything, know about everything. The fact is, with that sidewalk, 10 feet one way or 15 feet the other way will change the danger because we don't have that left and right. Is that correct? Yeah, I mean, you took the answer already.
I have to understand your question, but
Like
to
moving
me,
it into the intersection rather than being where it's at the entrance to the intersection, or taking it up away from that outside the intersection and bring it further, like halfway between two entrances. I'm not saying it's the perfect solution, but where it's at right now, it makes 0 sense. I'm an architect by trade into it, but I know everything for life. But this, as a drawing, made no sense from day one, to put it where they put it, and you just answered it. If you move it in the middle of the intersection, will be even safer.
One of the reasons why it particularly bothers me is it's between effectively two intersections, the driveway and the intersection for Main Road and Sousa Road and Schooner Drive. The reality is, having cars stopped on either end of it is not good for a pedestrian crosswalk. Pedestrian crosswalks, for safety, you want visibility. You want people to see them. And every intersection, whether it's marked or unmarked, has a de facto crosswalk. And it's an area where pedestrians cross. So that, to me, the fact that this is effectively a mid-block or non-intersection crossing does particularly increase the risk factors.
Thank you very much.
Susan Anderson. I'm on Main Road. I'm a member of Preserve Tiverton. And I live in the Osborne-Bennett Historic District, National Register Historic District. And I can see this corner from my house. I have a question for you regarding, I know you've been talking about the traffic on the roads. Have you considered, did you look at the traffic within the site itself? Especially doing left-hand turns. So the exit, which when they looked at it, there were two different exits. One row of cars going to the right, to the north, and the other to the south, so there were two lanes. Now that they have changed it so that there's only one lane there, you have cars backing up in the exit to go out on Main Road. Some are going to go left, to go south, and some are going to go north. Did you look at the traffic there that's going to be influenced by the queuing of traffic behind somebody that wants to go south?
I've got to unpack that a little bit. So, I mean, first of all, I just took a look at the PAR traffic study, and they specifically analyzed the exit driveway as having a separate left and right turn lane.
Yeah, when they did that, there was.
Yeah, and it's changed now, due to comments from the state, to only have a single lane exit. The level of service they had for the westbound left was D, level service D, almost 35 seconds of delay, and then the right turn was level service B. I don't know what that is when you combine them and to one lane. So I don't know what the queuing really is and the delay at that driveway. And I think your question had to do with the traffic entering the site southbound. Are they blocking people from making a move? Is that your question?
Well, no, exiting, are they going to be people that are going, well, there's that. Because if they're going south, they're going to be blocking people that want to exit south, right? If people are waiting to go in and taking a left-hand turn, going down Main Road south, right? And then they want to make a left-hand turn into it, right? They're going to be blocked by people that are trying to get out on the other side, or the people that are trying to turn left at the exit are going to be blocked by the people that are waiting to turn left, because there's no left-hand turn. The street is not wide enough to have a left-hand turn lane there.
So there is a potential issue. Inbound traffic is going to end up having the priority because they're on Main Road. They don't have to stop. And the queuing for that, depending on the delay and how many vehicles back up, because there's not a left turn lane, I'd have to see it and analyze it to know if it would block the exit from functioning. But I could see that there's potential for that, depending on the volumes.
It seems to me like there's potential for gridlock. Am I correct in that?
That's not a technical term. That's more of a newspaper like, description term, so.
It's a neighbor turn because I can see that. And I have been behind school buses that stop on Main Road, and I've counted the cars that are behind them, and I've counted up to 32 cars behind a school bus that's been stopped. Because in this state, you have to, the monitor has to go out, I don't know if it's like that in New Jersey, but the monitor has to go out, look in the front, look in the back, look underneath, go into the front again. So there's all that they have to go out and do every time they stop. I don't know if they do that in New Jersey, but there's a long time if you're waiting behind a school bus.
I have no expertise in school bus operations in New Jersey or Rhode Island,
Okay,
so, thank you.
thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if it's appropriate, we just might talk logistics, unless there's anything more for tonight's hearing. It appears that it would be appropriate to have a discussion about setting the date at your next regular zoning board hearing, so there's a date certain, and on behalf of the applicants, we'll make ourselves available whatever night is good for the opponents and the board.
So their next meeting is August 7th, our official meeting. So as we have done in the past, to avoid notice issues, my suggestion is we continue this to August 7th. In the next 2 weeks or week, you get us another date for a special meeting in August.
And I'm happy to coordinate blackout dates for the opponent, like we've been doing, if
And I don't
Pat
know
and I can contact and see if
And I don't know
they're-
about the board, but if you have vacation plans in August, please let us know. So,
So I just recommend we just do what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And that work.
Yeah.
yeah,
Coordinate, we'll find a date that works for everybody.
yeah.
All right.
No more Wednesdays.
I was just gonna say that.
No more Wednesday.
No more
Let's take a poll.
Wednesday. I'm with you.
17-hour days.
I do them every day.
You're younger than me.
Probably you're right. I'm sorry, probably you're right. Sorry.
All right, motion to adjourn. right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to have a motion to adjourn?
Excuse me, this matter will be officially continued to August 7th. We should, yeah.
All those in favor of continuing this matter to August 7th?
I get a motion that we continue.
Second. All those in favor?
Good night.
Good night.
John, you want to give this back to them? This,
Getting
this,
excessive.
that was, she left that for me,